All right. So, hi, everybody. Thank you again for coming. We are here today for the Spring Infant Toddler Institute with the amazing Breastfeeding Task Force to talk about some basics of breastfeeding and just kind of build your knowledge in this area, which is near and dear to my heart. And I think it's great for infant toddler teachers to know as well. So, for our first session for today, we are going to be talking about the benefits of breastfeeding. And our lovely trainers who are here to join us from the task force are Christina Thompson. She works for the WIC program in the state of New Hampshire, and she is also a board certified lactation consultant. We have Andrea Ackerson, who is a registered dietitian, and she is also an international board certified lactation consultant. And then finally, we have lovely Miss Jeanette, who is a dietitian, and she is also a certified lactation consultant, and she's also the owner of Creative Nutrition LLC. So I'm going to turn it over to them so that we can get the ball rolling with this amazing information. So take it away, ladies.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. On behalf of the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force, I'd like to welcome all of you. And just a personal note, I have a now 2-year-old niece, and I've done some pickups from her childcare center, and your job's wild. So I appreciate it. You never know what you're going to walk into there, and it's always leaves me questioning how you guys do what you do, but you're so appreciated in the lives of these families that you're caring for their little ones. So I just wanted to say that throughout the presentation, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. We have a number of subject matter experts from the task force that have joined today too, that are kind of in the background, and they'll be answering questions as we go. We will also have a period at the end, the last 10 minutes or so of the presentation for you to, we'll discuss the questions in the chat, anything that needs further discussion, and you'll have a time that you can unmute and actually ask myself, Jeanette, or any of the other speakers any questions. And we will follow this format for all 3 of the sessions today. So I wanted to start by sharing a bit about the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force. We are a nonprofit charitable 501c3 organization whose mission is to protect, promote, and support breastfeeding through education, outreach, and advocacy. And our vision is that all families in New Hampshire will have access to high-quality breastfeeding education and support through evidence-based care and well-informed professionals. And I just wanted to share a few stats about this state coalition. We were established in 1997. In fact, Paula, who's one of our speakers today, is the mother of the task force. She actually was the one who kind of got the ball rolling with that, along with a bunch of other engaged professionals. So today we have 49 members. That's as of this year, and it's a multidisciplinary group. So it includes a lot of lactation consultants, registered nurses, registered dietitians, physicians, WIC employees, public health workers, and more. So we are very lucky to have this depth of knowledge and, in different specialties, which I think sets us apart and makes us a really special organization. A few of the recent initiatives that we've done that I wanted to share with a lot of pride is that we have worked with Keene State College to develop a breastfeeding support and workplace resource kit, and have awarded mini grants to 45 businesses within the state. And you'll hear more about some of our toolkits later on today. We've also been recently active with the bill SB 175, which is also known as the Momnibus. So you may hear some about these bills if you're involved in anything politically. So this is a bill that will provide more workplace protections and breastfeeding protections for moms beyond what the federal protections. So that would be really good for our state. And that's currently underway right now. In 2010, we began a program for training of baby-friendly hospitals. So baby-friendly hospitals are ones that have policies that help to promote and to educate on breastfeeding importance, and have policies in place that help moms to, get off on that foot if they're choosing to breastfeed. So we've done the training curriculum for them, and we've recently revamped that. So a number of the hospitals in the Northeast are using our training materials. And then we also plan and deliver an annual conference each year for maternal child health workers, and do continuing education for our own licensed professionals throughout the year. So as you can tell, 49 members, we're all volunteers. We're small, but we're mighty with the things that we've been able to accomplish. So I wanted to show you our website very quickly here, just because there is a portion of it that you may want to access. So I'm going to just pull up our site. As you scroll down from our homepage here, it'll go over the mission and vision that we talked about, some of our core values, and then it'll go through some of the strategic goals that we've come up with, which you'd be free to look all that over. But this section right here might be helpful for you as far as families and community support. So, and also employer support, I suppose, too, because of course, many of you may be breastfeeding moms yourself. So this kind of helps tie some things together. And I would encourage you to use our website as a launching for any material that you may want to share with families, or use personally, or with friends, or wherever. As we go down here at the very end, there's actually a sign up where you can put in your email if you'd like to stay abreast of any of the things that we have going on with the task force. And so that just might be a helpful way to stay connected with us. Okay. All right. So as far as our day today, I just wanted to kind of lay it out for you. We're covering first benefits of breastfeeding, and then we're going to be going into the childcare toolkit and workplace support, which will highlight some of the breastfeeding friendly childcare setting and how to apply for an award that we have for this. It'll also show you how to utilize the workplace support toolkit that I referenced before. And in our final session for the day, the bottle feeding 101, this will highlight information about infant alignment, the timing of feedings, how to pace bottle feed, and how to store and handle human milk. So that will be really helpful, for you as far as application stuff day to day. So the benefits of breastfeeding, at the end of this training, I would like you all to be able to identify benefits of breastfeeding and breast milk to baby, mom, partner, community, and healthcare providers. Name 2 of the nutritional differences between breast milk and formula. Identify 2 strategies that you can use to partner with and support moms. And list 2 resources that you can use to find additional information about breastfeeding. And this could be for your own information or to share with the families that you work with.
To be supportive of different types of families, we do want to highlight that there are some interchangeable terms you may hear today, you may see in literature, or you may hear families talk about. So these are from the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine. And they are ways, there are terms that can be used to be inclusive of non-binary and trans parents. So to go through those terms quickly, lactating parent is a parent whose body produces milk. And this may be an alternative to calling someone a mom or mother. Parent's milk is milk produced by the parent, which could be an alternative to mother's milk. Human milk is milk produced by a human, which does or may include donor milk, depending on the situation. And this is an alternative to breast milk. Expressing or pumping is the removal of milk from the human body using a hand or some sort of pump, and is an alternative to breast pump or breast pumping. Chest feeding is also another term that you may hear, and it's really the act of feeding baby from the glandular tissue on the chest, and may be used in replace of breastfeeding if breast is, feels too female or doesn't feel like the appropriate description of how the baby's being fed. These are all words that may come up today, and we want you to be aware that there are lots of different ways that families can feed their babies using human milk. And if we're aware of the different terminology, we can be more supportive in wherever that journey is for that family.
So the reason that people choose to breastfeed can be multifold, so generally these are goals that mom has come up with before the baby was even born, and they can be derived from what individual knowledge they have, what their personal or family experiences, experience of friends, their lifestyle, and what support they have. And the key thing is that the choice to breastfeed, just like the choice to not breastfeed, is an individual and personal choice derived from a variety of factors. Each mom may come to you with a separate and distinct goal regarding feeding, and it's important to honor, what she sees as what's important to her and her family. So there may be a number of varying combinations of breastfeeding families, and I want to just give you a few examples here, just to kind of, and I know you've probably run across all of these, but you may have your mom who's exclusively breastfeeding and she chooses to not give any bottles at all, and that may be prior to coming to you with her infant, but also maybe even when she's in the childcare setting. So she may select a place that is close to home or close to work so she can stop over and see that baby and be there for all of the feedings. You might also have a mom who's breastfeeding early on and then decides to pump when she goes back to work, and so her baby's getting a bottle when she's away from the baby, but still breastfeeding at night and in the morning, or whatever their schedule may be. You may also have a mom who's breastfeeding prior to going back to work, and when she returns to work, she may not feel she has the time to breastfeed, or that just may not work in her schedule, and she may choose to formula feed when she is away from the baby, and may not want to pump or not have time for that at work. So that's another combination that you might see. And then you have other moms who choose to pump from the start rather than latching the baby directly onto breast, and those moms may just pump their breast milk, but exclusively breast milk feed their infant via bottle. So there are so many combinations and everything in between. That being said, those are just a few of the common scenarios. And that could be because mom, doesn't like the idea of latching on the baby, or it could be that she had a lot of hiccups in the road early on. There's a number of reasons that mom may choose that. So it's just important to not assume and to understand that each mom has their own unique journey that they've been on and their own unique feeding goals. So it is important to know, though, that breast milk at all stages and ages has benefits. And the benefits are dose dependent, meaning that the more breast milk, the better, the longer the breastfeeding, the better, but any breast milk is beneficial. So, and I just like this quote here: while breastfeeding may not seem the right choice for every parent, it is the best choice for every baby. And so that's kind of important to remember from a nutritional angle as well. So I am going to go over, specific benefits for each of the groups involved. So baby, mother, partner, community, and you guys, childcare providers. I've broken this section into two pieces. So there are some benefits that are strictly for direct breastfeeding. So that would be latching the baby on. And then there are some benefits that are specific to breast milk in general. And that could be from the breast or the bottle. So I just wanted to kind of break that down to understand the pieces here. So for direct breastfeeding, if you're latching that baby on, that baby has optimal nutrition, it's ready on demand, it's at the right temperature every time, and it's also delivered in a beautiful mom package, which doesn't hurt. It promotes bonding and attachment with the mom. Direct breastfeeding also helps with the baby's oral development. So In this way, it specifically promotes jaw muscular strength and palate growth. So if you take your tongue and actually run it on the top of your mouth right now, you'll feel that it's hard up there. And then as you get further back, it's soft. So the front is your hard palate, the back is your soft palate. And that actually is the part that's kind of built and developed and partially through breastfeeding. It reduces dental caries. It helps with reduction in speech problems. And this is because of that oral anatomy being shaped through breastfeeding. There is a link with direct breastfeeding in the reduction of SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome. And this is thought to be because of the improved arousability with breastfeeding compared to formula, meaning that breastfeeding babies often arouse more easily and feed more often. And that is actually helpful in that newborn period of time when SIDS is more prevalent. And now I kind of just want to go into the benefits of breast milk. So this would be from breast or bottle. So breast milk is, it's important to know that that mother's milk matches more than 50% of the baby's genetic material. It is tailored specifically to that child. And milk from other species or plant-based milks, like a soy-based thing, are just genetically different than that. Babies will have the improved ability to fight off disease. So there are components in breast milk that actively bind pathogens and reduce availability of pathogen food source as well, so that it actually helps to activate that infant's immune system. And there are targeted antibodies that are transferred from the mom as a result, which results in the reduction of illness for that baby as well. There is a reduction in rates of developing chronic disease. And that would be specifically diabetes, obesity, and some of the GI diseases like Crohn's disease and colitis. And it helps to promote optimal GI health for that baby as well. It reduces colic and gassy symptoms, and it can be protective against necrotizing enterocolitis because it coats the gut. This is a condition that will often affect preterm infants, so it's helpful, especially in that case. There's shown to be improved acceptance in babies, their palate being open to a number of different foods from 6 months when they begin on solids into adulthood. And this is thought to be because the odor and flavor is different every time based on mom's diet, versus when you're formula feeding a baby, it tastes the same every time. So there's not that exposure that there is with the breastfed infant. And there's shown to be improved intelligence in breastfed infants as well. So the benefits don't stop there. Mom is, there are big benefits for the mother as well. So of course, breastfeeding is convenient because you have your milk at the right temp, ready to serve. It goes with you. There's not a lot of additional equipment you have to bring. It helps with that bonding and attachment. It can really help to empower mothers, because if you think about it, babies from birth to 6 months, babies who are breastfed, that's all that they need nutritionally to sustain their growth. And that can be really empowering for a mom who, maybe has a lot of concerns to begin with about just her adjustment to new motherhood and all of the decisions that come with that, and whether she's doing things right. And when she can go to her doctor's appointments or see that baby's growth because they grow out of clothes, that can just be really helpful to her, and know that she's the one who's sustaining them and providing exactly what that baby needs. There are hormones involved with breastfeeding, specifically prolactin, which is involved in milk synthesis, and oxytocin, which is our letdown hormone. Those are hormones that reduce stress and promote calmness, and they're often called mothering hormones for that reason. Breastfeeding can decrease postpartum hemorrhage, and this is because the act of breastfeeding will stimulate uterine contractions, which helps to get that uterus back to pre-pregnancy size, and just help with that healing post-birth. There's a lowered disease risk for mothers specifically for breast and ovarian cancer, heart disease, and osteoporosis. And there's less time lost in career. So picture that you are providing a food for your baby that also helps with that baby's immunity. There's less incidence of your baby getting sick, and therefore you are, not having to take off the days to care for the sick child as often. Obviously, babies still get sick. It's not, it's not a miracle food, but it kind of is a miracle food, but it's not going to create no sickness at all. But there's certainly research to support that it reduces illness for a baby. There's increased energy expenditure by the mom just in that milk synthesis process. So that can help with postpartum weight loss. And there's also some help with increased child spacing. So especially exclusively breastfeeding and not supplementing, that can really delay the return of mom's period. So it ends up spacing out children a little bit further, which can be helpful as well. Now, some of the specific benefits to partner. So breastfeeding leads to a healthier mom and baby, which also puts less strain on the partner as far as taking off time to care for a sick baby. It produces less offensive smelling diapers, and the cost of breast milk is free. And this is pretty major because especially specialty formulas can be a substantial cost, and most babies tolerate breast milk. So formula can range in cost from $1,500 to $4,000 per year. There's more convenience for partner and reduced sleep disruption. And that's just because there's no bottle preparation or cleaning in the night, no warming of bottles. So it's helpful in that regard. Of course, there are things that partners can still do. It doesn't have to be all on the mom. So diaper changes are a great way to involve the partner, or rocking the baby post-feed, calming them down and putting them back to sleep. Those are great ways the partner can pitch in. And then as far as benefits for the community, so breastfeeding reduces waste in production, shipping, and packaging. There's decreased use of environmental resources. So for plant-based or soy-based formulas, there's chemical fertilizers used, to grow that soy, and then there can be overgrazing of land by cattle for your cow's milk-based formulas. And it can also decrease healthcare costs and decrease employer costs, which at the end of the day, we all pay for. So that's helpful on a community level as well. And then as far as benefits to you as a child care provider, so there's no preparation or mixing involved, and we will be discussing in detail in the third session the milk storage and handling and the best ways to warm milk and all of that. But that's very helpful in that regard. So you don't have to be measuring things out. There are better smelling diapers, and then contributing to the health of baby, mom, and community is a unique role that you have in supporting families. So definitely being able to support these feeding goals is truly special for you to be able to kind of be in that unique position to help there.
Awesome. So now we're going to look at the nutritional comparison between human milk and formula. Formula is the safest alternative when human milk is not available. However, they're not as equal as the media sometimes makes them out to be. The good news is they both provide nutrients to support growth for baby, bone and blood health, as well as brain development. However, if you look at this little image, you can see that there's a very different amount and types of nutrients in one column than in the other. And this is a quick visual that's really helpful for families when they are comparing or considering just formula and just human milk. There's a lot more that breast milk provides that formula, by the way it's produced and just naturally what it is, can't provide. Next, please. So we're going to look at the 7 components of breast milk that are available just in breast milk and are not currently available in any formulas. So the first that Andrea touched on during the benefits for moms and babies includes the antibodies. So these antibodies help reduce the risk of baby getting sick. And even if baby comes into contact with some different germs, the breastfeeding and the latching to the parent can help with increasing the amount of antibodies for the parent as well. The hormones produced in breast milk can help with babies' growth. So babies grow quickly and they're supposed to. These hormones can help with them growing well as helping with their hunger and fullness hormones. There are antivirus protections in breast milk, and this does include the COVID vaccine, the COVID virus that can be helpful for preventing babies from getting sick from viruses that may be uncomfortable for a little bit or maybe all the way up towards deadly. There are anti-allergen components in breast milk, and that's super helpful because environmental and food allergens make life really miserable, uncomfortable, and can be dangerous. With the exposure to breast milk and different foods, nutrients, and environmental components in breast milk, that can help reduce babies' risk of developing those allergies as they grow. There are also anti-parasitic components in breast milk. So parasites are an organism that can get into the lining of the intestine and cause things like diarrhea, other digestive and gastrointestinal issues, and they can be deadly for babies. In developing countries, Giardia is a key example, a contamination from food and water. With breastfeeding, it can help reduce the risk of these parasites taking host in babies' intestinal tract and causing issues down the road. We also have our growth factors. So growth factors help, just as they sound, baby grow. Cells need to divide and specialize in whatever they're supposed to. Breast milk can help support that and encourage those cells to divide properly and specialize appropriately. The last item on this list is enzymes. So enzymes include lipase and amylase, which are important for the immature pancreatic function in baby. Babies are born with a pancreas. It needs a little help getting up and running as baby grows. And the enzymes that are provided in breast milk can help support that pancreatic function while the pancreas is developing. Colostrum, which is the first milk that mom or the breastfeeding person provides or produces, is particularly high in hormones and enzymes, which makes it super important and super helpful if the family doesn't know how much breastfeeding they want to do. If they can start with the colostrum and make their decisions after that, or decide to transition or do a combination after colostrum's provided, that colostrum is considered liquid gold. Tons of nutrients, tons of benefits, and definitely getting some of those great things right off the bat for baby. Next slide, please. Those benefits don't stop after baby turns 12 months. So there are families who will nurse their kids for a couple years, and that is great. We want to be able to support those breastfeeding families because the benefits that we just talked about in the breast milk extend to the toddler phase as well. And I'm going to highlight a couple pieces from this slide that talk about some of the benefits for breastfed toddlers. So the first one I want to focus on is hydration. So hydration is a big part of keeping babies going and keeping kids going. And if you guys are working with a lot of little ones, you may see that it's hard to get some kids to drink or what have you. Babies and toddlers who are breastfed are more likely to stay hydrated because that breast milk is providing hydrating factors. As Andrea touched upon too, with the taste buds and the pickiness, kids who are breastfed and toddlers who are breastfed are exposed to all sorts of flavors in the breast milk based on what the parent is eating, and those flavors transfer to the breast milk. That can be a really positive thing because fussy kids and toddlers is pretty common. Having the exposures to those foods early can help with reducing pickiness and encourage more variety in their eating. And then the last big one is the immune system. So the benefit for you guys is definitely less sickness or less intense sickness around the daycare between siblings. And a great way to help support the health and well-being of the whole family. So this is a great slide. You can always check in and see if there are other things that you appeal to you as well. And it's a great way to encourage and support breastfeeding even after that first year of life. Next slide, please.
So I want to put you in the mindset of a new mom, a new breastfeeding mom on her first day back to work, because I know you've seen this mom before. So she's had many decisions leading up to this day about everything large and small. So she's had to select daycare. She's probably got one that's close to home or close to work to make things convenient. She's had to meet all of you, all of the childcare providers, and tried to get a comfort with passing off her little one to people that she hasn't known for very long. She's had to coordinate her schedule with work, probably had to have some awkward conversations about pumping and what's involved, depending on what she does and who her boss is. And she's had to coordinate schedules with partner, like who's going to drop off, who's going to pick up, how are we going to run this new life that we're leading, because everything's kind of changed. She's had to determine her feeding goals. And these are things that are generally kind of fluid as you go. Like your first baby, you're not sure how things are going to go sometimes, and you may lack the confidence initially. And then as soon as you're comfortable with everything, things change and you have other questions and concerns and that sort of thing. So, and then she's set some personal feeding goals for her time to return back to work as well. So at drop off, you might see, a mom loving on that baby and all smiles and putting her best face forward and all of that. But much like the iceberg, there's a lot under the surface that she may be doing a good job of disguising. So she may have worries about how this will go, both her return to work, her maybe guilt about not being with her baby more, worries that she's going back too early, or how things will go, worries that the baby, might be feeling, upset without her or missing her, or just, all the stuff that's wrapped in there. She may have concerns about bottles, if she is bottle feeding that baby, or having the baby get a bottle at daycare, because maybe she hasn't given a lot of bottles. Maybe she's been exclusively breastfeeding and she's not even sure the baby will take the bottle. There's all sorts of concerns there where she's worried about their physical nutrition and what they're going to be able to take there. Maybe there's new staff at the facility that she hasn't met yet, and she's wondering how that's going to go, and if she's going to get communicated, all of the stuff that she wants to know, like how often the baby peed, how often they pooped, and all of the feedings that they had. She's worried about what to wear, something as simple as that. All of her maternity clothes are too big on her. All of her pre-pregnancy clothes are too small. Nothing really fits right because she's at a weird size. And, she's got to worry about her breast leaking at work. She's trying to wear a shirt that will disguise it. She's got her breast pads. She's got her backup breast pads. There's a lot to think about just in that regard. And then, she comes with literally a whole car stuffed with items she's got for work. She's got her work bag and her lunch, but she's also got all of a sudden a pump. She's got her ice pack. She's got her cooler bag. She's checking to make sure she's got the flanges for the pump and maybe some milk storage bags. She doesn't even know where she's going to pump at work. So that's a whole nother thing. So there's a lot of stress and worry wrapped in there. And then she's got her baby gear, and you guys know what that is. So, I mean, she's got diapers, wipes, she's got multiple changes of clothes, pacifier, toy, bibs, bedding, perhaps, bottles, a sun hat, like just the list goes on and on. So she's got a lot going on that you can't see, a lot of worries and a lot of concern.
So we did want to talk about some tips to help support families and moms who are going back to work and may be needing a little extra TLC or a little extra support from the community at large, as well as from the people who are taking care of their little one. So to help maintain mom's supply, which is usually the biggest concern when it comes to breastfeeding, a couple tips that can be helpful for that include pumping as often as baby eats. So if baby's taking 4 bottles a day at daycare, mom needs to make sure that she's pumping at least 4 times at work. The amount that she gets may not be exactly the same, but that continuous feeding the baby as often as baby is feeding pattern helps her body recognize that she still needs to make that milk and keep up with the production. There may be other containers that mom needs to use to store her breast milk, like glass containers or other food storage safe containers. And that can help reduce the risk on, well, I can't pump because I don't have breast milk bags. As long as it's a food safe container, it's safe for storing breast milk. So if you find moms coming in with other containers for breast milk, it might be because they just needed some other containers and ran out of baggies. To help with the expression or getting that milk out, having a blanket, looking at videos or looking at pictures may help mom during pumping, because it helps her kind of reconnect with the fact that there is a baby involved in all this. The pump or the hand expression is a great way to fill in for baby, but really baby's the best pump. And if baby's not there, having something to remind mom of baby or think about baby helps with building up that supply and removing it from her system. There's also legal rights for moms to pump within that first year after baby's born. So if families are feeling concerned or, well, I don't know if I'll be able to, it's going to be a burden on work, there are legal protections for breastfeeding and nursing parents. So that can be helpful for them to know, so they don't feel like they're in such an imposition for their workforce. There are also some ways to help support breastfeeding moms at pickup. So if possible, having a semi-private space to nurse or pump upon pickup can be really helpful for keeping that breastfeeding relationship going, as well as helping mom from getting too full or helping prevent baby from getting too hungry. Communicating with the family about the best time for the last bottle during the day. So that way, if mom needs to come and pump or feed baby right there, baby isn't already full on a bottle that could have been used later on. And for some families, that might mean doing just an ounce or two a little bit before mom arrives, so baby isn't super hungry, but also isn't super full and not interested in taking breast milk straight from mom. And then offering encouragement for continued nursing and pumping. There's a lot that goes into just being a new parent, and if they hear positive feedback from other places like daycare and their doctor's office, those might be the only encouraging words they hear in a day, and that might help them stick with the journey that they want, even when it gets really hard or they feel like giving up. Ooh, next slide, please. So we're going to look a little bit at some more ways that caregivers can help with the support of breastfeeding for families. So the praise and encouragement, like I mentioned, can be super beneficial and can help be that turning point between, do I give up now or do I keep going? Referring to WIC for additional support, not only with food, but with breastfeeding support and loaner pumps is super important and can be super helpful for families who are lower income. Having lactation resources available. This might include brochures, books, websites, or contacts for lactation specialists in the area to help with giving those families that the earliest connection to resources if they are feeling like they're struggling or they just want some extra information. Allowing moms to pump or nurse upon pickup can really help with that breastfeeding relationship and help keep that breast milk supply going. Update policies to include breast-friendly feeding practices, and I believe we'll be looking a little bit at that in our next presentation starting around 9:45. I also want to encourage people to check their personal bias when it comes to feeding. It may be that you had a really rough time breastfeeding in the past, or maybe you had like the easiest time in the past, or maybe you've never had a personal experience with breastfeeding. Double check your words and your bias, because what you say to families might be taken as truth, or might be taken as applying to everyone. So just be cautious with what you say regarding feeding and how you say it, so you can help support the family and provide good information. Also, August 1st through 7th is World Breastfeeding Week, which can be a great way to encourage and talk about breastfeeding or provide additional resources. I know the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force keeps tabs on some of the activities that are going on throughout the state. So if there's something that you're doing, we'd love to hear about that. And there are lots of different ways that you can get involved in World Breastfeeding Week. Next slide, please. These are some resources that can be helpful for just learning more information, kind of checking statistics on what breastfeeding looks like in our state, as well as learning about ins and outs of breastfeeding. We also have some local support resources that can be helpful for providing to families looking for additional connections in the community, support or assistance in some capacity. And I believe all these are on the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force website as well. We do want to open it up to any questions that have come up. So if you'd like, you can unmute yourself and ask a question or drop it in the chat. We're here to help you, and we're so glad that you're able to participate in this in-service today.
There was one really good question that Becca had brought up. Becca, do you feel comfortable unmuting and asking your question? Yeah, that was a really good one.
I'm kind of involved in early childhood ed as a consultant and a coach, but I'm also a postpartum doula. So I'm working with families through that kind of matrescence phase and trying to figure out how to get them to the best spot for what they need. And one of the questions that has come up that I haven't been able to answer is, how does a mama who's exclusively pumping gain the information that her baby needs different types of nutrition for growth and development, or different amounts of milk for really filling baby up? How is that kind of feedback given? Because there's a little bit of a dance, we know, with breastfeeding, where baby kind of gives mom that information. But if there's exclusively pumping, how does that happen?
That's a great question, Becca. I'll start, and then, Jeanette or anyone else, feel free to chime in. So generally what we suggest for exclusively pumping moms in the very beginning is that they want to pump 8 times in 24 hours, because that's a typical, I'll say 8 or more times in 24 hours, because that's a typical breastfed baby schedule. We really want the mom supply to match the baby's demand. And you're right, that's more easily handled when the baby is direct nursing versus when you're, trying to wrangle your pump schedule and the baby's hungry now. And, so the ideal would be that every time that you're feeding the baby, you're pumping. Now it's difficult to execute, and it needs more hands, especially in the beginning when the feeds are coming fast and furious. So I usually will suggest in the beginning to have someone feed the baby while mom pumps. if they have the hands for it. That's the ideal way, because it's really such a commitment, just the pumping part of that. And generally, if you can kick it off with a good supply in the beginning, then it's a little easier to maintain. It's sometimes we see moms struggle who are exclusively pumping when they had a really rough start, where they maybe weren't pumping enough for various reasons. It could even be that mom was very sick after she gave birth, or that she was trying to breastfeed and it wasn't working, and it took a little while to figure out baby wasn't transferring, or that kind of a thing. And so, but that emptying of the breast is actually what's really important in stimulating new milk production. So I'm setting the stage right there for the early on days, but then moving forward as the baby grows, you'd want to continue doing that. And even if she's pumping after the baby begins solid foods, you'd want to continue pumping frequently enough that you're matching the baby's either eating, because they're eating small amounts, then eating schedule, bottle schedule, as best you can, which is easier said than done. It is definitely, these are some of our most committed moms, honestly, because that's real work there. I don't know if that fully answered your question or not, but the emptying is the key part. The emptying of the breast is the key part.
When it comes to the some of the other benefits that can be in breast milk for babies, or for breast milk that's being exclusively pumped, the antibodies and some of the other hormones that mom's making can still be passed on to baby. There isn't going to be like that the same communication as baby latching on to mom, spit from baby getting into mom's breast, mom's body recognizing those germs and then creating the antibodies that way. But even kissing baby on the forehead, or mom being exposed to other people, her body is going to start to develop those antibodies that can then be passed on to baby through breast milk. So it sounds funny to say like, oh, kisses are, part of the immune system for baby, but they really can make a big difference there, because the germs on baby's head or on baby, obviously baby is around those, and those can be created through the breast milk. Yeah.
Good point, Jeanette. Yeah. Becca, did that help to kind of answer your question, or do you want to chime in if there's more?
No, that's definitely helpful. It's kind of a little nebulous in terms of like how to get baby all the information that they need, but that's definitely some solid science that is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do see a comment in the chat about
Paula, do you have something to add to that? Sorry, Andrea, it looks like
No,
Paula
that's
had
okay.
something to add. Oh, you're on mute, Paula.
There you go. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to add something, Becca, to this, to what Andrea and Jeanette have said. And I know, when you're saying the nebulous, and it's because there's so much of a variation, isn't there, with moms. So we know that some moms have no problem pumping at all even when they're full-time pumping moms. And there are other moms that have more trouble, that have more, like Andrew said, may have had a difficult time in the beginning and didn't set it up, weren't able to get it set up perfectly. But then there are moms who have insufficient mammary development. So they're smaller and they happen to have lesser breast tissue, and they may have to pump more frequently to empty. So that's we see all this variation on that bell curve, don't we?
Yeah, great point, Paula. Great point. So I'm just looking over the chat here. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Someone commented about how the formula shortages were such an issue, and it really, like, that itself is an excellent reason to at least set a goal of breastfeeding, or to really support these breastfeeding moms, because that would have been a huge worry. My kids are grown, but I was stressed for those moms. And there was actually a lot of people that reached out about relactation and things like that. Moms who had begun maybe breastfeeding in the beginning and had already weaned their child, but then didn't have access to formula that they needed, and were wondering about how they could now increase their supply, weeks and months after. So what a scary time for everybody. That was intense. And I also, okay, as far as copies of the slides, yes, we plan to send out the whole slide deck for you guys. So I'm glad you found some stuff that was helpful in there, and absolutely you'll have a copy of that as well. Oh, Lindsay already attended to that. Now I see your answer. So does anyone else want to unmute and ask questions?
I have like a personal question about it. Have you found, because I know at the end you kind of mentioned that like some moms have a super easy time with breastfeeding or pumping, and other moms really struggle. In your like experience with supporting people through that, do you find that people that need to use or need assistance in getting pregnant, like IVF or some other hormone type of things to help get pregnant, do they tend to have a harder time all throughout, including breastfeeding, or is that like a completely separate issue?
Yes.
They do.
Yes. And not every mom for sure who's had difficulty getting pregnant, because there's a number of reasons, that could be, but anything hormonally based, yes, absolutely. So there is a link there, and it can be harder for some of those moms. I hate to ever go into a situation where I assume there's going to be, based on the mom's history, that there's going to be some problem with them breastfeeding, because there oftentimes isn't, and you don't want to raise, concern if everything will end up being fine for this mom. You don't want to shake their confidence in any way, but yeah, absolutely. Definitely, like polycystic ovarian syndrome, that can be one that definitely there is a link there with possibly some supply issues down the line, but it's not every mom. Sometimes you have moms who have no issue whatsoever, and so yeah. Does anyone else want to chime in on that?
Even moms with multiples, that might be related to like IVF or another pregnancy along that line. Even moms with multiples. So I have a couple of moms I've worked with who are donating like gallons of milk along with feeding their multiples. So there is a large spectrum of what works well for families, and what they're willing and happy to do, and then how their bodies function. So if a mom feels like, well, I had a really hard time nursing with my first, like I don't think it's going to happen with my second. Every pregnancy is different, and her body is now a little more experienced and a little bit older. It may be a completely different experience than previous pregnancies. As well as there may be medical conditions that are more in check at this point, which may make it easier to maintain a breast milk supply.
I have a question. This is Janet. You were talking about how that mothers should try to pump during the time when their child would naturally be feeding, and try to pump as regularly during the workday as their child would naturally be feeding. I wonder, how does that work out for a full-time working mother, say if their child would naturally be feeding every 2 hours? Like, how would they work out being able to set aside time when they are expected to be working every 2 hours to do the pumping?
That's a great question, Janet. So there are federal protections to allow for, I'm going to say most moms, because the legislation that we're actually advocating for is to fill in some of these loopholes for some moms that aren't protected under this legislation. But they have to have reasonable accommodations and a private pumping spot. when they return to work. And I believe it's protection up to 1 year currently, according to the Pump Act, which is the new legislation. So that it's basically it's federally protected. Not that you want to straight up go to your boss and say, like, you know, start with that, but it's definitely a conversation they have to have about, hey, is there a space available for me here? And that has to be worked out. And it's maybe actually Jeanette, maybe, or Joyce, if you want to chime in, someone who's a little more versed with the verbiage of it. So I believe it's during scheduled break times, or
no,
sorry,
no,
go.
the
Okay.
pump act. Is that okay?
Yeah, go,
Oh,
please.
Yeah, sure. The pump act is very specific in that the employer is required to allow a mom to express milk as per her request. So there aren't really any limitations or during break or anything like that. And that's a big change. I think it also covers most people. It doesn't cover, interestingly enough, railroad workers or the flight industry, but pretty much everyone is now covered, including salaried workers. But that's a big thing about they have to provide time and space to express milk when the mom needs it.
And it has to be a private space that's not a bathroom, you know, and that's the other major thing too. So, but yeah, thank you for chiming in on that, Joyce. The Pump Act is new legislation, and it just went into effect in January, correct?
If I can just interrupt here for just 1 second, this is incredible conversation, but I do want to let everyone go to break. So if people want to stay and continue in the conversation, please stay. But for everyone else, if you want to go to break, we will see you back at 9:45.
And Donna, we're gonna, Paula will be talking a little bit more about the Pump Act in the next session. So we could carry it over to that. And when Paula,
You hear about this.
So I'm sorry, I just wanted to start this recording. And I wanted to let Miss Lindsay introduce our next presenters, because, oh my gosh, this is just everything about today so far.
I know.
I'm just so excited. This has been so valuable. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. Yeah, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good little break. That first session was amazing. So much good information and good discussion that came out of that. And I'm so glad that we were able to pull this together for today, because it's such good information. I feel like everybody will be able to pull something from this for today. So for our next session, we are going to be talking about the childcare toolkit. So the what you can do as childcare providers to help support moms and, you know, breastfeeding families and all of that. And then we're also going to be talking about in the workplace, so all of the other work environments outside of childcare, that and what they can do to kind of help support. And those speakers are going to be Miss Christina again, and then Paula Oliveria, who is, I loved how she was introduced this morning of being kind of the mother of the task force. And she is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so excited to have her and Christina talk about these two amazing supports that the Breastfeeding Task Force has brought into you know, this space to be able to help both of these areas. And I'll also be sharing just a little bit about some of my experience from when I was teaching. So it'll be the three of us, but I'm going to hand it over to Christina to get going on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay and Donna. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Christina Thompson. I'm a co-chair on the Childcare Committee for the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force and the breastfeeding coordinator with the New Hampshire WIC program at the Division of Public Health Services. I'm so happy to be with all of you this morning to talk about the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Initiative. So we're going to look at a little history first, and then we'll we'll look at the childcare toolkit and the workplace toolkit. But before we start, I really would like to take a moment and acknowledge Becky Dunn and Lisa Sorois for their hard work, their time, and their dedication to the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Initiative. Without it, we really would not be where we are at today. So what are we doing today? We'll look at steps to offer a breastfeeding friendly childcare setting as shown in the Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Award and online training module, as well as in the Surgeon General's call to action. Review benefits of breastfeeding for the infant, mother, in the child care center, which some of it will sound familiar from the morning session. How to determine if you have a breastfeeding friendly environment, and how to access the breastfeeding support in the workplace toolkit. So Sue, I think you had a question in the chat earlier about the environment, and we'll touch upon that when we look at the toolkit. So hopefully that'll be helpful. So our approach for the day, why is breastfeeding important for infants and mother? And again, some of this will sound familiar from the first presentation. Why is a breastfeeding friendly childcare environment important? New Hampshire breastfeeding rates. What are the breastfeeding initiatives in New Hampshire? And what is the Task Force Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Award? So why is this work so important with the New Hampshire childcare programs? To build capacity within New Hampshire licensed childcare programs and provide education opportunities for ECE professionals while responding to the U.S. General's call to action, and recognize the hard work and commitment that many ECE professionals are already providing to breastfeeding families. And we can't emphasize that enough. We know that so many are already providing this important support. So in 2011, the Surgeon General's call to action to support breastfeeding was released. 2011 seems like a long time ago, but the content in the 2011 release is still relevant today. Many mothers return to work before their baby's first birthday. Childcare providers play a critical role when it comes to supporting moms who are breastfeeding. In Action 16 in the Surgeon General's call to action states, ensure that all childcare providers accommodate the needs of breastfeeding mothers and infants. We know it takes a village to support breastfeeding. The Surgeon General call to action identifies 20 actions designed to strengthen programs that can improve breastfeeding rates and provide the support needed so women can be successful in their breastfeeding journey. A woman's mother and partner. A woman's decision on infant feeding is strongly influenced by family and friends, but more so from her partner and mother. Developing programs to educate partners and grandmothers about breastfeeding is really important. In the communities, strengthening programs that provide mother-to-mother support, such as peer-based programs. In our healthcare system, providing education and training in basic breastfeeding for all health professionals. Employment in childcare settings, ensuring that employers establish and maintain lactation support programs for their employees and ensure childcare providers accommodate the needs of those breastfeeding mothers and infants. And through research to increase funding, strengthen existing capacity, and develop future capacity for conducting research on breastfeeding. And then our public health infrastructure, continue to improve national leadership on the promotion and support of breastfeeding. It takes active involvement and support from everyone to help make breastfeeding easier. Human milk is the perfect first food for infants. It contains the perfect combination of fats, carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals to meet the nutritional needs of infants and to help them grow and develop. Human milk is a living substance with cells and other living matter that helps babies fight disease. A mother's milk changes during the feeding from morning to night, from day to day, from week to week as the baby grows. The milk is flavored by what the mother eats, which expands taste preferences that can lead to healthier food choices later. human milk can affect a baby's immediate and long-term health, which was talked about in our first session today. Again, so, protect against, diarrhea, ear infections, diabetes, asthma, eczema, colitis, cancer, obesity, and SIDS. And as Andrea, stated earlier too, it is dose dependent. So the longer they breastfeed, the better. Breastfeeding also has the protective factors on mother's health, help protecting against heart disease, breast and ovarian cancer, type 2 diabetes, and postpartum depression. We mentioned the mother-baby bonding earlier, helps with child spacing and saves money. And what about the benefits for the childcare programs? Breastfed babies are receiving all those wonderful immune factors that keep them healthy and happy with less digestive issues. Participating centers in the child and adult care food programs are reimbursed for babies breastfed, fed breast milk, and if mom breastfeeds on site. We have shared how important support is to moms breastfeeding. Child care programs that support breastfeeding are helping mothers reach their breastfeeding goals. And by supporting moms that are breastfeeding, you'll attract families who are looking for a breastfeeding friendly childcare environment. So knowing the important benefits and the Surgeon General's call to action, how are we doing in New Hampshire? So this data on the slide is from the CDC National Immunization Survey and displays the national numbers for New Hampshire. So we're going to take a peek here at the 2019 births. So up here you have ever breastfed. I'll go over to this screen here. You have ever breastfed. So New Hampshire was at 82.2%. The national average for ever was 83.2%. So New Hampshire is doing very well. And then we have, oops, here we go. Sorry about that, my mouse. At 6 months. And New Hampshire's at 61.3, and the national average was 55.8. So again, New Hampshire's doing very well. And then we go down to at 12 months, and New Hampshire's 42.5, and the national average was 35.9. And then we'll go down here to exclusive at 3 months. So these are moms, they're not offering any formula. And New Hampshire's at 55%, and the national average is at 45.3%. And then last here, we have the exclusive at 6 months. And New Hampshire's at 31.8, and the national average is at 24.9. So you can see there's work to be done. We're starting off strong. Women are people are breastfeeding, but it's that duration, it's that support that is really needed. So taking action in New Hampshire to support breastfeeding. So this displays a snapshot of New Hampshire initiatives. And some of this is going to sound very familiar. In 2010, the Break Time for Nursing Mothers federal law passed, and Paula will touch upon this a little bit in a later slide. In 2011, trainings and workshops were provided on supporting breastfeeding families along with the Let's Move Childcare initiative. This initiative promotes best practice goals for childhood obesity prevention. One of the goals, supporting breastfeeding. In 2013, through a Department of Health and Human Services grant, the online training module was developed. In addition, in 2013, a collaboration between Keene State College, the New Hampshire Division of Public Health Services, and New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force to develop and launch the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Award. In 2011, they had their first awardee. And to date, there have been 17 awards provided. Jump ahead to 2021, and the Child Care Toolkit was developed. So a lot has happened in a short amount of time. So as mentioned, in 2013, the breastfeeding friendly childcare training was developed. This is a free online training for childcare providers and will provide you with the education and tools that will assist you with establishing policies and procedures in your center to support breastfeeding mothers and their infants. And the link to access the training, it can be found on the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force. There is a link to WIC and then the breastfeeding section in that. And I'll show you both of those at the end. And it's also available on the Department of Health and Human Services website. So what were the steps taken? In 2013, the Department of Health and Human Services Division of Public Health Services grant award to Keene State College to look at and assess the breastfeeding environment in the New Hampshire child care programs, which led to the development of the Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Training and then the Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Award. From the partnership with the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force, the Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Award was created. So why was this award created? With the release of the 2010 Break Time for Nursing Mothers Law, the 2011 Surgeon General report, both supporting breastfeeding, more and more women are choosing to breastfeed. It's a win-win for childcare programs that encourage and support breastfeeding women. For centers that apply, they'll complete a 15-question self-assessment, submit a copy of their program's breastfeeding policy, submit practices that support breastfeeding, such as a handout or a brochure distributed at your center, a certificate from a training on breastfeeding promotion and support from at a minimum one staff person showing 1 hour within the past 2 years. Recipients of the award will receive a certificate, a magnet with the milk storage guidelines, and a breastfeeding welcome here window claim to show that your center is designated as breastfeeding friendly. We are happy to share, as mentioned earlier, since 2014, we have had 17 centers receive the Breastfeeding Friendly Child Care Award in New Hampshire. And to find out more, the application and the checklist can be found at the Department of Health and Human Services and the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force website, which again, we'll be reviewing at the end. So at this time, I would like to take a moment, introduce Lindsay, and have her say a few words, being a past recipient at a center that received the award.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. So before I came and joined Childcare Aware of New Hampshire, I was actually an infant teacher for 9 years. And when my center that I worked at before I came here, when I got hired there, the director had expressed that they were really trying to get this award for the program because they felt like it was something that was really important, not only, just for the families coming in, but also for the staff working in the building as well. And so alongside my director and my co-teachers at the time, we all kind of joined forces and we really took a step back and looked at our environment of the infant room that we were working in. And through a lot of trials and tribulations and plans that didn't work out and things like that, we ended up creating our mother's room. And we actually ended up we had a space across the hall from our room that was kind of being used as like a odds and ends storage space, and nobody was really going in there. And so we brought it to the head of our school, and they agreed with us after we kind of, brought to them our hopes and wishes for the space. And so we all worked together and we cleaned it out and we made this beautiful, private, accessible space right across the hall from our classroom for the moms to be able to use. And not only for the moms coming in, but also some of our fellow co-teachers who were working in the building, who were, brand new moms themselves, who were breastfeeding, and any other staff who was a part of our program. And it was honestly such an awesome experience because not only did we learn all this, amazing information about the importance of breastfeeding by going through the process of applying and all of, the steps that you have to do. But it really brought our center together as a whole. I ended up building relationships with some of outside agencies. So like our fire department to come in, our state licensing coordinator, we built a really great relationship with them in regards of creating the space. And so overall, it was really just a wonderful experience, even though there was some difficulties with kind of figuring out how to make this space and where to put it and, all of those things. It ended up being something that was so beneficial for our program. And I wanted to say that with my center, we were very fortunate. We had this beautiful room that we were able to utilize. And I know not all centers, depending on your structure of your building, you may not be able to have a set room that you can put this space into. And just know that the way the application is set up, it gives you all of the details that you need of, everything that is kind of required for the space. And you can go and look through your space. And even if it's, a small nook somewhere in the classroom, that you're able to kind of create that private area for that mother, or even finding another space within the center that kind of meets the criteria, you're already, setting up for success, no matter how you decide to kind of create that area for the mom and for your staff. And so it really is a great experience to go through. And if your center is invested in it and you have those good intentions, it's gonna be a win-win regardless. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it back over to Christina, and she's going to talk about kind of what those details are and kind of what goes into applying for this award.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. And
yeah.
I thank you so much for sharing that, because again, you have multiple people you could reach out to if you have questions, and especially with spacing, we know that can be a challenge. But as Lindsay stated, it is a process. But what's not a process in life, to get to the ultimate goal. But also, Lindsay, I like the way you said teamwork. Because that is important. You want people on board and working together. And I also like the collaboration, because again, all of that is so critical in any of our work, is the collaborations we build. Thank you again, Lindsay, for that. All right. So yes, we are excited to share the Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Toolkit. This toolkit is designed to help guide our New Hampshire childcare centers to establish a breastfeeding friendly childcare center for families and staff. Again, this can be accessed at the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force website. If you would like a printed copy, you'll have my contact information at the end. And by all means, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And after Paula speaks, we will be going into the website so we can show you how to navigate and find the toolkit for an easy resource. So within the toolkit, lots of reputable resources. I think Jeanette mentioned it earlier too. The task force website, is just a great spot for resources of all kinds, but specific to the toolkit, we have some embedded right into it. And there's materials added. So recently, two resources from the CDC that were created in August, I believe it was 2022. So again, we're posting these. So supporting breastfeeding families in the early childcare, and education programs, the handling, storage, handling, and preparation of breast milk. I mean, there are different documents out there. This one just happens to be from the CDC. So next steps for you, expand your knowledge and practices, complete the breastfeeding friendly online training, train and educate staff, look at a breastfeeding friendly policy. You'll see samples on the task force website and within the toolkit. Communicate all this with your staff and families, and then look at the environment. Lindsay had mentioned this, just to designate space for breastfeeding and expressing milk, have some promotional materials and resources. And if you ever need any, you can reach out to me. Learning and play materials, guidelines for handling and storage breast milk, having those posted, and then apply. We all want to be part of raising our healthy babies. So next, I'm going to hand it off to Paula to talk about the breastfeeding friendly, the workplace resource toolkit.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah, this has just been an exciting morning, hasn't it? We are, again, on behalf of the task force, we're so excited to be a part of your group. And we know that we all take the baby steps to make this whole world a better place with mothers and families. So I'm excited to be here. And yes, I am the grandmother, actually, of the task force. Thank you, Andrea. I was the founder of the task force. However, not without the Department of Health and Human Services help, Department of WIC at the time. I really give them all the credit for giving me that job and for allowing me to do this. So, and since then, of course, I've moved on and, have a multitude of lactation experiences since then. But anyway, moving on to our New Hampshire breastfeeding friendly workplace resource toolkit. I know I just have a small section here at the end, but that toolkit is on our website, and Christina will bring us through that. It just consists of multiple resources to help guide businesses through the transition of becoming a breastfeeding friendly workplace. We really want to assist them to be dedicated to the well-being of their employees and workplace as a whole. The resources are really meant to guide them in their workplace to tailor or adapt any of our information to their specific needs at their workplace. So that's really what it's dedicated for. And then next slide, please. Thank you, Christina. So this is just a slide of what you've heard mentioned multiple times today, the 2010 landmark federal law that came to be. This is a fact sheet from the U.S. Department of Labor on the break time for nursing mothers of 2010. And basically it was creating a reasonable break time for employees to express breast milk for their nursing babies for 1 year. And of course had to be, other than a bathroom, had to be shielded from any view or free of intrusion of any coworkers or the public or anyone. And again, although it was a landmark law, it unintentionally covered hourly paid workers so that 1 in 4 women were not covered. So here we are, 2010. And if you could advance the slide, please, Christina. And you've heard this mentioned multiple times too, and you'll probably hear this more in the future. The Pump Act of 2022, which was signed into law by President Biden on December 29th, 2022. So it's really, more or less brand spanking new. And it really extended to more nursing employees. Okay, there are some exemptions on that and that have not come into place yet. And those are the airline and the crew. Now this is people on the airline now, women on the airline that work, and crew realty members, and that they're working on for 2025. So those are the people that right at this moment, and airline workers are included in all that, except the people working on the plane and in the railways, moving people from point A to point B. So they're working on that. but the rest of the people are really extends to all people. So hourly workers, salary workers, and such. We know that this is new, so it's gonna take a little bit, even for us as the task force, to integrate all of this, to help educate the state, on this. So like anything else, it's the baby step stuff. You've heard mention no time restriction for mothers, where you will see on our website, we do have times to pump, basic times to pump, to allow a mom to have that time. And basically, I can tell you the businesses out there after dealing with this, and Joyce is on this webinar as well. And the businesses want to have something. However, the Pump Act says there's no restriction. So we're going to be integrating all of that as time goes on here. The other thing about the Pump Act is it really makes it possible to file a lawsuit for a mother for monetary remedies if she's not accommodated. So again, the future will hold, the pump, the previous federal law in 2010, it's taken a lot to even educate that. And all employees are subject to that, to federal law. There's no doubt about it. There are individual things that happen within states, and you'll hear more about that as time goes on. Know that I know Andrea mentioned the omnibus, Senate Bill 175 that's out there right now, and hopefully moving along here. There'll be a lot of education out there. So I have no doubt that we'll come back to you folks, and we'll be talking again and educating again, because it's going to take quite a bit of education throughout the state on this. So know that our website will be undergoing some revision through all of this. But right now, we'd certainly like you to take a look at it. So next slide, please. So the other thing we wanted to talk about was the Breastfeeding Friendly Employer Award. And that, is another hand in hand with the Childcare Award that was created. It began in 2013. To date, we've had 35 awards granted. We wish that was even more, and we know that we could do more than that. Some of our efforts with this award have been grassroots efforts. Things have gotten better in more, recent years, but some of them were grassroots efforts. We've had one child care center apply, and that's under his wings in Guilford, New Hampshire. So, but we'd like to see more of that. And we know from this presentation that we'll probably get some feedback from you folks on that. So basically what on our award, what the task force really wants is employers who are establishing and maintaining comprehensive high quality lactation support for their employees. So in addition to basic requirements that we know from the federal law, we want them to have as a requirement a breastfeeding policy communicated and provided to all employees. And there's again, like Christina said, there's a sample on our website. And again, some of that may be changing, so just know that and keep watching, stay tuned. We need a private and secure room with a lockable door, not a bathroom clearly, comfortable chair, flexible, unpaid or paid breaks for at least 15 to 20 minutes every 2 to 3 hours. And again, the businesses really needed that some kind of a boundary to this. Know that the Pump Act is telling us that federal law is telling us that there should be no time restriction to that. So we'll have to see. The Senate bill that's coming up is going to have something, but that goes on in states. State laws are a little bit different than federal laws, and then we kind of blend the both and make it work for our individual states. So more to come on that, but please keep up to date, and we will be keeping you up to date as well. And we encourage all of you to just disperse this information to whomever, but also keep in mind your own individual center. The other thing that Andrea, I think, mentioned is one of the things we did is we had received a grant, and this is before COVID. Okay, so those 3 years before COVID occurred, we got a grant that we were able to. There were 4 consultants: Joyce Kelly, who's on the task force and who is the co-chair of the task force, with Lisa Lamadriz. She was one of the consultants, myself, and 2 lovely ladies from Keene State. And I'm so sorry I didn't write their names down, but I think Joyce will put them in the chat probably right now. Anyway, they were wonderful, and we did this, we did 45 businesses, as Andrea said, and we helped them set up rooms. So we gave them money to do it. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore, but what we do have is we have a task force with a lot of experience, and we can help anybody to create in the smallest of space or the littlest corner, something that will support your parents. So we really encourage you to do that. And again, we can assist you in any way with that. So in the meantime, if there are any questions, certainly we would love to send this back to you with any questions that you may have. Meanwhile, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Paula, for that overview. Now, we're going to go and look at the website. So, and then we can take some questions after, because possibly some questions will be answered as we go through this. Andrea brought us through. Let's see. Hopefully it'll. Okay, good. I just want to make sure. Are you seeing the task force website? Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, I have to look this way now because it's on my other screen. So Andrea showed an overview of our website. So, just to show you up here, you have your tabs for 10 steps. Community, this is where childcare friendly award and application and toolkit will be housed. You have employers, which again will show has the work that Paula has mentioned. There's even one for healthcare providers, and there's a resource page that Jeanette had spoken about earlier. So we'll just look at the communities here. So again, you have, and the resource tab is just below, so I'm not going to click on it. We'll just go down to it. So there's resources for our childcare providers, and there's toolkits. And again, down here, you have a list of resources, and we continue to, build upon this. So as more resources become available, we're trying to keep this new platform is just wonderful. Our media group did just a fabulous job in putting this together. So it's a little bit easier for us to keep it updated and so forth. So we're just gonna click on here on the toolkit so you can see this. Oh, let me go back up to the top. Sorry that looks blurred. So again, this is just Becky Dunn and Lisa Soros just did an amazing job with this toolkit. I think you'll find that it walks you, step by step what you can do. It'll give you information on the benefits, which we've talked a lot about today. Creating that environment, spaces, in a timeline, the assessment, a policy, a sample policy. So all of that is right in this toolkit. And I'm just going to go down to slide. And I really I love the format of this. It's very easy to follow. It's nice. It's just so friendly. The AAP guidelines. So I'm going to go, tips for creating the breastfeeding friendly environment in your centers. And down here is the space. So again, lactate. So it just gives you an idea of items that, would be needed to help families. And I think I'm not sure, I think it was Sue that asked about this. Does this help answer your question? And you can come off mute or put it in the chat, that's fine too. So again, and then it gives you example of spaces that were created. You can see, you know, on the back of their door, they list resources for employees and families. So there's lots of different dynamics that can take place. So down here, I had mentioned earlier, the documents to support breastfeeding, those are all available. You can print them out and hang those up.
Just so you know, Christina, Sue said, yes, it does. And she said, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Sue. Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I kind of got screens going everywhere here. Yeah, so again, just these great resources, lots of information. And down here, the sample. Again, a sample policy. So, you know, you can see it outlines everything needed. A nice little template there. And we're just going to scroll down a little bit more here. We'll talk a little bit more about the award. So again, this takes you through, it outlines to how to apply for it and what is needed. And right down here. So again, we talked about the self-assessment, which will be linked below, a copy of your breastfeeding policy, a certificate from at least one staff member that has attended a training, and you have the breastfeeding friendly online training. Sample printed breastfeeding materials available. Please do not hesitate to reach out if you're looking for something for your center. The Office of Women's Health has a wonderful guide to breastfeeding. It is available as a PDF, but I have printed copies if you'd like one for your center. And then it has the information to submit, and then it has the application right here online. So the process, it's all laid out nicely, but if you ever have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And let's just take a peek at the employers. So is Paul and Paula, please dive in. But as Paula had stated, some documents here are going to be in revision to be updated. But it just takes you down straight through here, support in the workplace. Again, that sample policy. So if you're looking for ideas, there's an example right here. On the website. And then
can I say something, Christina?
Please.
We are going to be updating the policy, and Paula can speak to this too. Our sample policy to reflect the Pump Act, because that has specific things related to break times, whereas the Pump Act has required employers, as I said, to provide pumping, milk expression breaks as requested, which the policy needs to be updated. So
yes, thank you, Joyce, for reinforcing. And I know it's been said a couple of times, and we need the reinforcement because there's so much that's changing, and we're here to keep up with it.
Yeah, and if anybody ever has questions about that, feel free to email us. I put the email in a couple of times. We do get questions. If you have moms or anybody that's ever has a question about anything, we can definitely answer their question and hopefully help them. Sometimes they're in very difficult situations in terms of their ability to express milk at work, but feel free to ask us. You know, we monitor the email. Paula can answer it. Anybody that monitors our email can answer it.
Perfect. Thank you, Joyce, and thank you, Paula, for those reminders, and thanks for putting the email link in the chat too. Yeah, so this again, Paula has touched upon this, but it's a nice toolkit. There will be revisions as they've stated, but you have access to that. And down here, similar to the Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Award, we have the Employer Award. And Paula, is there anything specific with this you want me to point out?
It's all on there, just like the Childcare Award. They can apply online, and that kind of thing. And then that goes through Joyce, and then it comes through to me as the chair of workplace breastfeeding support. So, and then we review it, and again, we always give a call to them. We see whatever they've sent in, and if there's any help needed, then we assist them with that, and then go from there. But pretty much, it's really on our website. But again, as we've said before, and Joyce is reinforcing here, there'll be a lot of revisions from the Pump Act, and then also if Senate Bill 175 actually goes through, and it looks like, things are, pretty good there. We kind of have to merge state law with federal law for all of us. And so there'll be a lot of education involved throughout the state. And we assume that, we're all going to collaborate together to do that. So.
Yes, thank you. So again, it's just a wonderful website. I'm just going to click on the resource just to show you. So recently I had mentioned for the Childcare Award, I had mentioned the DHHS website. So again, right embedded into the task force website, you'll see WIC. This brings you to the WIC homepage, and then you have your breastfeeding and breastfeeding friendly childcare. So are the online, going to correct myself, the online training. So this shows you the online training that childcare providers have access to. So again, the steps are there, the resource page. We also have Zip Milk in New Hampshire. So this is a resource if you have a mom who's looking for someone within their area to help with lactation services. They can click on that. They can put their zip code in, and it'll bring up anybody who has joined Zip Milk in New Hampshire, any providers, bring up their name and contact information. And now I have a little tickle in my throat. 1 second. Sorry about that. I'd mentioned your guide to breastfeeding. This is from the Office of Women's Health. This is in a PDF version. I do have physical copies if you are interested in those. Yeah, and is there anything else, Joyce, Paula, that you think I should bring to, excuse me, I have a tickle again, their attention?
It sounds good, Christina.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. We always provide your guide to breastfeeding to the workplace support places wherever we go for their moms. And for those in our grant that have the lactation rooms, we provide that for moms to have access to there as well. Again, like you said, Christina, it can be downloaded as well. Yep. For businesses. And
yeah. Wanted to address, somebody mentioned something about ratios. And so I know as the assistant director in my program, we also had gone through this. And so we were definitely supporting not only families, but our staff. So staff who were breastfeeding, specifically, if they were pumping many times, they would come upstairs and I would support in the classroom. Or cover. But if they were, we would definitely, what we would try to do is just switch. So if they were in a classroom, that person would go into the infant room and nurse while the, if they felt comfortable, mind you. And what we were finding is that most of them felt very comfortable just walking into the infant room and hanging out. So it was completely up to them. If they wanted to go into the specific room that we had set aside, they could do that. If they wanted to be in the room and just be in the room with the babies and hanging out and nursing, they could do that. It was completely up to them and how their comfort level was. So ratio could be counted if they did it that way. If not, then I covered in the classrooms. So I think that ratio, as far as and way we did it was the assistant director or our director stepped in and covered.
Yeah, this is I'm finding is a big topic right now because it's so just background for the task force members who are here with childcare through the licensing guidelines for the state of New Hampshire for childcare programs. We have specific ratios for each age group so that the children were maintaining that supervision and that safety, and much like a lot of other workplaces, the childcare field right now, we are really struggling with staffing. And so a lot of the some of the teachers and directors who are here today were expressing of which law, so to speak, do keeping that balance between like the Pump Act law of what they're required to provide for their staff, who are breastfeeding and nursing, but also keeping in compliance with, the childcare law of like state licensing rules and like keeping that regulation in compliance with the ratios. So finding that balance, because it can be really difficult, if the director is the only one who can cover and they're in the preschool classroom that day because the teacher called out sick, or the teacher left, and now they're having to wear their director hat and a teacher hat at the same time, and just not having that person to be able to go and relieve that staff member to be able to go and do that break. So I think that's something that is being found a little challenging for the programs right now. So I had said that we could try and see if we could, consult with you guys and maybe bring it back to our team as well too, because we have a lot of different backgrounds, and see if we could try to put out something for them, of just a range of ideas of how to kind of tackle that, because it's hard. It's really hard.
We also had a cook that would in our program, so she could come into the classrooms. Now, having said that, she was not an associate. So
Yeah,
once again, when you're in early childhood, an associate teacher is someone who can be left alone with children.
yes.
So you have to, and if you're an assistant teacher, you have to have an associate teacher with you.
Yeah.
So ratio, it's not just the amount
The ratio. Yeah.
It's not just a ratio, it's also the the
Qualifications.
teacher's title that goes along with it.
Yes.
And qualifications. So there's
Yeah.
quite a few little things that go into making sure that these can happen. Go ahead,
Wait.
Danielle.
Well, just with that, Donna, I found that just in personal experience that a lot of teachers are fine with just switching and pumping or breastfeeding in the infant room. However, when we are short-staffed, or they'll just decide that they're no longer comfortable that day and they want the break. So you have to find coverage, and it's like, I mean, I can't. We're all in a classroom. So at what point were they comfortable with it before, but then that day they've decided they're no longer comfortable with it at that particular time, and knowing that there's nothing you can do about it, are we protected at that point because the last 7 months they were fine with that and now suddenly they aren't? Like that's some of the concerns that we have on the admin level, is that yes, they were comfortable with it, but then all they have to do, especially if now lawsuits are involved, is just call up and say, I wasn't comfortable with that. Like, even if we have it in writing, like, yeah, they were comfortable with it for these times, but now this time they weren't comfortable with it and we could not accommodate. So that's where we get very nervous. I mean, my centers are very breastfeeding friendly. We have separate rooms, we have extra staff, we try and hire extra staff, the whole thing. Like, the reality is that childcare is a struggling industry as a whole. And there's times where every single one of us are on numbers and no one's getting breaks. So we definitely can't get a break for your every 20-minute pump break that you've decided you suddenly need that day when previously you didn't.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Danielle.
So I don't know how to do the little hand thing, but I think also when you're trying to cover for somebody, like say you cover for them for the pump break, and you're thinking it's going to be about 35 or 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. In this particular time, it's 45 minutes. That 15 minutes can actually really mess everything up along the whole day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm wondering if there can be some type of a between the breastfeeding mother, staff, and the director, some kind of a schedule so that when the person steps away, is this 15, 20 minutes or is this 45 minutes to an hour? Because it does matter when you have somebody covering. That person that might be covering for that breastfeeding break may need to get over to actually cover somebody's lunch break. So we don't have, across the board, I haven't seen, nobody seems to, you just have so many staff members that it doesn't matter. I mean, we're all struggling to get the staff members that we need to cover ratios and to cover having the quality that we want to have in our centers.
Yeah,
Can there be some type of, I don't want to create some kind of form or have, some kind of agreement that actually ends up being part of the lawsuit.
Certainly these comments are just unbelievable. And we know in the world, everyone seems to be struggling, don't they? Staffing. I mean, you go to your doctors, it's not the same. It's just not. Everyone is short and everyone is, and there's all these comments that are made. And it's just the world has really changed. And I can only imagine the struggling for you folks within there. But in terms of matching it all and what your requirements are and what the with the laws and the childcare rules and I think to continue to bring this forward to the higher people above us is really, really important because you can only do what you can do as well. Janet and Lindsay and Danielle, we can only do what you can do. But we also have to, when our employees are treated well, we have to know what's reasonable as well, don't we, Danielle? And I think you're bringing up some points with that. So there's problems, and I think important to bring this to the higher ups and to document this really well. And I know you all are really, good with all of that. But it's just a sad state of affairs. I mean, in terms of us coming up with an absolute today, I mean, that's not going to happen. But I think continuing to bring it to the people above us, that this is what we're doing. And we're trying to blend these laws together and these requirements. But I think just to validate what you're saying, this is real. But we have to remember what's reasonable within all of the things you folks are bringing up.
And I mean, there's the comment from Michelle, which is like, I think a huge part of this as well, where she had said that like colleagues made comments and then that discouraged breastfeeding. And I've definitely found that in my centers, and we're trying to like, no, this is not just a right, but this is a benefit that, people should be able to do, especially, I mean, we're a childcare center. It's one of the benefits of working for us. You get free childcare. You have the ability to breastfeed versus pump and the whole thing. Like, we are very supportive of it. But at the same time, day after day, when they don't get their lunch on time, or they feel like they can't clock out on, like their lunch isn't coming on time because the lunch person's covering, and like all of these things, they do make comments. And as much as we discourage them making comments, they're saying, well, I'm not feeling supported and I'm not. So it's just this vicious cycle. And I see that happening all the time, just from the pressure to stop pumping or breastfeeding from other colleagues, just because it does affect everybody when someone breastfeeds. And in a childcare environment, I tend to have 2 or 3 breastfeeding at the same time, like at the same time. That super affects everything. So it's just hard.
Yeah.
I do have to say, though, on a positive note, that it is an incredible marketing tool. So being able to walk through the program as the assistant director, that was my tool. I was the person who brought the parents through and introduced them to the program and introduced them to the infant toddler room and it was an incredible gift to be able to share that to them and share what we did with, like this is where the room is, if you would like to come in during your break, if you work nearby, here's a great place you can be. If you're bringing breast milk, this room has been trained. We know how to do this. We have this, this tells you that we know how to do this. And I'm not even going to tell you that. I'm going to let them tell you this because they went to the training. So it's like it was an incredible tool to be able to tell them. It's like, saying they had CPR and first aid. When you're a new parent, this is really important to hear. So anywho, we are at 10:45. This is, I love this kind of discussion, by the way. This is amazing. But I do think, yes, we need to bring those super concerns. We need to keep those flowing because those are mixing the amazing information in with the reality of how we're going to keep our places staffed and working. But let's, if we don't mind, take a break and return. So I'm going to turn this to.
Want me to start?
Yeah, okay.
You're too fast.
Is everyone able to see the poll? So as you're coming back in, you can answer those questions.
Hi. Yeah, I can see the poll. And I just walked back to my laptop. So I do have a clarification question. What exactly is it that you're referring to when you're talking about paced bottle feeding?
Which is where I went in with the I don't know question at the answer at the bottom. Because my thought was, if you don't know, maybe that's a great result too.
Right. I know what I think it's asking, but I don't want to assume.
Exactly.
You will learn all about it in our last session.
Oh, so do we fill this out?
Yep. This is for the presenters who are going to be doing the last session for today to just kind of to be able to get a little temperature check of where everybody is with their knowledge for our last topic. So
I know I'm with you. I kind of think I know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm excited to find out if I'm right.
Answer them as best you can, and we'll go through all of it.
Okay, somehow I lost. Where is the questions again? I lost that. Can you post it again, or is it on my end?
It would be on your end.
Mine disappeared too.
Oh no.
Yeah. Mine is still there.
So I believe on the bottom.
So if a co-host clicked on end, then it would have closed. So if one of the people who's a co-host, which is all of the speakers, if they clicked on that, it would have ended the poll for everyone.
Oops, that's me. I
Okay,
apologize. Can you resend it?
Bet you could resend it, Donna.
Let me see. Oh yeah, relaunch poll. Here, there we go.
All right, I relaunched it.
Here we go. All right,
So
nobody click anything.
If you've already answered it, answer it again.
Yes, do it over, please.
Don't touch the red end poll button. Only click on your answers.
And that's not on everybody's screen. It's only on co-hosts.
And thus we learned a valuable lesson. don't touch the red button.
Has everybody gotten a chance to?
Not yet. We're still, let's see, we have 9 out of 17 people. Ten. We're getting there. There's some thoughtful people here.
Mm-hmm. That's good. We like thoughtfulness. All right.
Almost, we're at 13.
Does the math also take into account all of the people attending? So perhaps the speakers or
Yeah.
CareAware
Yeah.
staff are not answering those?
Yeah.
If,
Yep.
yeah, so I'm not answering them.
Yeah. No,
And
everybody.
myself, I'm not either.
Yeah. Everybody who's marked as a co-host doesn't have the ability to answer. So, yeah.
All right, so we're gonna give one more minute, see if anybody, got that last, like, I don't know. Do I know what this bottle feeding is? Do I not? Do I want to answer? This is really confusing.
There's no shame in not knowing.
Nope. Nope.
Also, we don't know if you don't know because it's anonymous.
And it's, I think it's okay to move along too, John.
Yeah, just for the
So we-
sake of time.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna
I
end
don't
this
want
poll
anybody
right
to
now,
feel rushed.
and we're gonna share the results.
Oop. All right. And while we are sharing the results, I will do the little intro for our last speakers of the day. So this is our last session for the morning, and it is Bottle Feeding 101. And we are going to have Brittany Bullock, who is a pediatric speech language pathologist, and she's also a certified neonatal therapist, specializing working with medically fragile and complex infants. We're going to have Michelle Scott, who is also a international board certified lactation consultant, and she has a amazing background with her work experience as well. And then we're also going to have Paula again to talk about Bottle Feeding 101. So I'm going to turn it over to these lovely ladies.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think Christina was going to post my slides.
Actually, Brittany's going to do that, so I think she's doing that
Is
right
Brittany
now.
doing it now? Okay. Thank you, Brittany.
Were you Brittany, or did you still want me to?
Oh, I thought I was just sharing for the video. I'll have you share. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Let me just pull that up. I said he just had a little
Apologize.
miscommunication. We'll get.
Sorry.
There's been a few changes here on this one just because of the video on pace bottle feeding. So for all of you participants, just so you know that we really have tried to make this work really well and smoothly, but a little video link has caused a little bit of a snag for us.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the first screen, Paula?
I am not.
Oh,
We have the background of your computer, so like what the desktop looks like.
okay, let's try this again. Sorry that you had to see my messy background. All right, let's try one more time. How's that look?
Perfect.
All
So
right.
that's the first slide. And then when you advanced is when we saw, there you go. There you go. Thank you, Christina. So this little section here, and I know it's going to be a little bit tight on infant alignment and safe infant care practices. You know, this, just to let you know, this presentation is like an hour and a half type of presentation. So I've tried to reduce it to kind of the 15-minute segment here. So I'm going to do the best I can and look forward to that and any of your questions that you may have later. Next slide, Christina. So what we want to be sure of, and I think we've talked about this today a number of times, what we know for sure is connection with parents, connection with our coworkers, before content is so important. And in terms of our moms and families, we know how sensitive they are about caring for their babies, but also our coworkers in what we talk to them about. Next slide. The other thing that we know for sure in terms of alignment, and this whole thing on alignment, I want you to know was born out of New Hampshire. And this was part of me being on the sudden unexpected infant death committee within the state, where we review every single death of a baby that dies newborn in that first year, and you know, having to look through them and seeing some of the issues that happened with alignment on some of the babies. So what we know for sure with infants is that they're very flexed in utero. And we know that they don't need to be in good alignment. They have oxygenation going through the placenta and the cord. So they don't need that ear, shoulder, and hip alignment. They are in a little ball inside their moms. And but when they come out, life is different. Next slide. So another thing we know for sure is that there have been apparent life-threatening events, ALT events, sudden unexpected postnatal collapse events. Some people call them ALT, some people call them SUPC. During the birth process, during skin to skin, during feeding, during holding of infants. So we just need to know, and particularly in those first couple of months of life, that babies are very, very vulnerable to suffocation and airway compromise, that kind of thing. But also beyond, for some of those infants that you may be caring for that are, you know, that were late preterm, they were a little bit early, they have low tone, they have neurologically, they're neurologically impaired. Certainly those infants are even more prone beyond that 2-month period. Next slide. So we know alignment, as we said, as soon as the baby's born, it begins at birth. Certainly when a baby is put in skin to skin, which is what we should do, what all should happen within hospitals, and is certainly happening in hospitals today. The baby's dried and the baby's put in skin to skin. And you can see this first slide on the left here, the baby, you know, the cover is pulled away so that you can see the alignment of the baby. You can see the baby's face. And then on the right here, you see the baby in proper, really with that cover going over to the top of the shoulders, with the face being, that's visual completely. And that's safe skin to skin. There's a whole certification on safe skin to skin, just so you know that. We could do, you know, an hour plus presentation on that sometime. Next slide. So here we go with safe and unsafe skin to skin. You see on the left here, we can see the baby's full face. We can see that covering only up to the top of the shoulders. And then on the right, this happens to be a premature baby with that baby curling down, flexing down. You can't see the baby's whole face. This baby's at danger if it stays in that position all too long. Next slide. So alignment principles, go on all day long. We know that whenever we're talking to a coworker, if we see, we're training somebody at the center, all teaching should be individualized, respectful, and non-judgmental. We want to meet the mother or the employee where they're at in the moment. And we want to target those messages specific to her. We want to enhance the confidence. And in order to do that, we have to do it in praise. And I think you people have mentioned that a few times today with the people you work with. Building confidence with praise increases either a mother or family or an employee's confidence in us, and she's more apt to hear the messages that we're going to relay to her. Next slide. So I'm not sure what happened in this, to be honest. This is cut away, but it's a mother holding a baby in the bed. I don't know, Christina, if that's what you can see or what you folks are seeing, but this is a mom postpartum, obviously, and holding a baby in straight alignment with good pillow support under her elbow with the baby's head. It's a good time for any kind of teaching, to, appropriate use of pillows and blankets away from the baby's face, and, certainly addressing maternal fatigue, prevention of infant falls by proper support when you're holding babies, and again, not over bundling the baby. Can you see that, Christina? Is that what you all are seeing, that cutaway?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened, Paula, but I will make sure when the PDF goes out that the full picture is up there.
Yeah, you can visualize what's there. She's holding a baby with good pillow support and good alignment. Next slide, thanks. And then again, anytime we see a mom or a coworker holding a baby and we're trying to teach them this proper alignment principles, ear, shoulder, and hips in good alignment, we always want to take the opportunity. This happens to be a premature infant in a NICU. This is my daughter who never wanted to have children. Here you go. Here's Jackson. And he's 9 now, and he's wonderful. He's the first baby you saw on the first slide. And all went well. But you can see whenever we have an opportunity to mention alignment things and give confidence to the mother. I like the way you're holding that baby right now. The baby's in such great alignment and the reasons why. And then we teach her or the person within the daycare, at the same time, giving them praise. Next slide. And again, anytime you can teach, uncles and aunts and daddies and grandpies and all of that about alignment in a way, again, praising them for the way they're holding the baby, the way they're looking at the baby. The baby's looking at this grandpa here. This happens to be my husband. You're seeing all of my family, whether you wanted to or not. Next slide. And here we go, even siblings. So this is Sophie, Kate, and Jackson. And, she learned about alignment way back when, she's, now 12, and this little Jack is 9, and here we are. But again, all these teachable moments, anytime with family, with mothers, with coworkers, with people that we're training is just so important. And although we, you always think this alignment thing that people understand it, once you start to really think about it, you see it in public and you see it where it's not happening. And sometimes it really scares you, once you know about it, especially if it's a young baby. So these are the things. And again, we've lost babies in New Hampshire. Babies are lost all over the world with this. So this is not just, something we just thought up or anything like that. This really, really happens. So next slide. And again, it starts right in breastfeeding. We're talking to a mom about it right away. It's proper breastfeeding. It's the way of the world. And we're teaching how to appropriate use of pillows. We're teaching her how to prevent infant falls. We're talking to her about the hormonal effects of breastfeeding, which Jeanette and Andrea so beautifully stated this morning. that can cause her to be tired. But also then on top of that, she has maternal fatigue from all of the things that were mentioned earlier in the presentations. And again, you know, we certainly want to individualize our teaching as appropriate to this mother and meeting her where she's at, because that's where it's going to matter to her. Next slide. And then there's that laid back nursing, which you may or may not, you know, see this in a daycare center or whatever, but important to know because with all those hormonal effects that we talked about, you know, moms can fall asleep and certainly we've lost babies in the United States in this particular breastfeeding position. So we need to be careful of that. Next slide. And then the whole alignment thing with bottle feeding, it's all the same. We have to keep it in mind. Certainly, how do we eat? We're sitting up. Our hips are flexed, right? That's how we're able to eat properly. And it's no different than the baby. So again, straight upright alignment, good hip flexion helps the baby to be able to feed better. They can maximize the feeding, which is what we want. And of course, the baby is facing us and you know, we want to follow their cues always. And Michelle and Brittany are going to talk to you more about that later. Paced bottle feeding is always the best way to do it for babies. And again, you're going to see a lovely video on this, and Michelle and Brittany are going to emphasize it. But always, and you can see this left hand, this is a posed picture. It happens to be me with Jackson, and we pose this so that his head is turned in. He's not in really good alignment. You know, he's hanging a little bit, and we want to maximize that, and we want to prevent anything like aspiration to the baby or anything like that. We want them to be totally supported, as you see in the other pictures, in good alignment. But always observing the infant for acceptance. Next slide. So again, in terms of acceptance, we're talking about, look at this baby on the right. He's given us all the cues that he or she is not ready to take this bottle right now. The little frown that you see, perhaps this baby needs to be swaddled, perhaps a little bit, perhaps this baby needs to be, obviously you want to stop the feeding right at the moment and get the baby comfortable and that kind of thing. So always look at infant acceptance. I know it gets crazy probably in the daycare. You're trying to get this done and lots of things are going on. We understand all of that, but these are things to keep in mind. On the left here, you see a baby with low tone. No hip flexion. The baby's not in alignment. It's actually not flexed forward. It's extended back. So baby is really prone to aspiration and airway collapse and that kind of thing. So these are the things that, again, when we're teaching any new employees and we're feeding infants, these are the things we want to keep in mind. Next slide, please, Christina. Again, always, these are all of the instances you'll see with siblings feeding babies. They need to learn about this alignment thing. And again, the baby up in the upper right corner is Mabel May. This is my latest grandchild. Obviously, this baby's a little bit older, but I want you to know this baby's a little bit tiny and has had a little bit of struggles, but just wanted to nurse this way. And again, alignment's the same. It's all the same. We want to make sure the baby's safe, and we want to make sure the baby's feeding is maximized and it's happy. Always happy during feeding, right? We're happy when we eat. And again, interacting with the baby. So you kind of see me there in the lower left, interacting with Mabel. And, again, she's looking at me. She wants this to be happy. We had some weight gain problems and ended up having to give a little bit of bottles, but I want you to know she's 10 months old now and she's exclusively breastfed and doing well, finally gaining weight. So, and there's Daddy over there trying to, when we were doing some bottles in that upright position in good alignment. Again, once you look at these things, once you understand it, once we teach our mothers, once we teach our employees, new people we're training, these principles, they're going to do the right thing. Next slide. And again, all of the helpers for breastfeeding, skin to skin helpers that you see here over to the left, always in good alignment. You can completely see the baby's face. And when you can't, we can get into trouble, as in that middle slide, and also that far right slide that you see. We've lost babies not in our state in this particular carrier. So we always have to be careful with alignment. But again, once you teach parents or workers or when you're orienting people, the principles of alignment and why it's so important, then they're going to make the right choices in wherever they're handling the baby. Next slide. So again, alignment's important in all aspects of caring for infants. That's why the car seat's so important. All of you know that. You've heard that a million times. And particularly small, babies that, were, this happens to be Mabel May, who was a really small baby at birth, not a preemie though, but a mom that just, my daughter has smaller babies, but also had COVID during the pregnancy. And those babies tend to sometimes not grow as well. So we had a little bit of issues with that, but alignment even more important with them because they're all babies in those first couple of months. But when you got a weaker baby, we want to keep that in mind. Next slide. And then, but again, alignment's important in all aspects of caring for babies. The car seat is always a big thing, the infant seats. And of course, you folks know all about all these products. You hear about them from your moms, just as we do, caring for moms. But it just seems like there's always another product out there that they may be asking us about, or we may be using or whatever. And we always want to be really, really careful and, adapting. And although this left-hand one, you're going to see this is Mabel. We just couldn't get her straight in that car seat. And that's why there are rolls alongside of her. But of course, we're watching her at every moment. Her face is completely exposed and that kind of thing. So, but again, adapting that alignment without causing any further harm or any risk of suffocation or anything like that is just so important. Next slide there, Christina. Yeah, and this is the end, and I always kind of like to end with this, and I know this is true. You all know this is true. People will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that's moms and families and employees and colleagues and each other in the groups that we're involved with. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll jump right into paced bottle feeding and then feeding, storage, and handling of milk. These are the objectives. I'm not going to read through them for time's sake, so feel free to read through those. We can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about paced bottle feeding first. So I'm Brittany Bullock. I'm a speech language pathologist and a neonatal therapist. I'm also a certified lactation counselor. I've worked for the past 6 years at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center in Lebanon, primarily working with infants in the NICU. And I'm also the lucky mom of 2 little boys. They're 2.5 and 4.5. I have personal experience in returning to work as a breastfeeding mom and also bringing my child to a childcare at a breastfeeding friendly center. So a little shout out to ABCs at New London Hospital. They were phenomenal. So I have a similar quote on here as Paula said. I work with a neurologist who said this to me once. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I've adopted this in my care of the family unit. It's important to always continue to grow in your knowledge base, but it's also just as important to build relationships and trust with families you interact with, especially when caring for their child. And I wouldn't be a speech pathologist without tapping into the area of communication here today. Communication with parents and caregivers about their child's feeding is important, and honoring the child's only way to communicate is essential. So we're going to talk a little bit about responsive feeding and infant-led feeding. So we can go to the next slide. So what is paced bottle feeding? So paced bottle feeding is a method of bottle feeding that allows the infant to be more in control of the feeding and the pace of the feeding. It slows down the milk flow into the nipple and into the infant's mouth, allowing the baby to eat more slowly and take breaks when needed. And it's ideal for infants who are also breastfed when they're with their mother. So we're going to talk a little bit about the reasons why, and then I'm going to show you a video to put it into perspective. Next slide, please. So why implement paced bottle feeding? So it reduces the risks of choking or being overwhelmed by the milk flow. The infant is less likely to refuse breastfeeds when back with the mother, which we know is so important. We want to really preserve that relationship and that dyad between infant and mother and breastfeeding when infant goes home. And it supports infant in determining when they are full and reduces the risk of overfeeding. So I'm going to touch really quickly on slow flow bottles. Slow flow bottles are supportive of an infant who also breastfeeds. So when an infant breastfeeds, there's that period of a faster non-nutritive suck where the infant is eliciting that milk ejection reflex or that letdown from the mom. And so when an infant bottle feeds, the infant receives milk into the oral cavity immediately. So immediately upon sucking, they're getting the same flow rate, whether it's fast or slow, whatever you're using. And so some infants will develop a preference for bottles if they are fed with a faster flow bottle, or if the paced bottle feeding approach is not being used. And if a bottle rate is too fast, the infant will often reduce their sucking pressure, which creates the appearance of a weak suck. So I often will hear that baby has a really weak suck, that they don't have a strong suck, or they have a really poor latch. And so if the milk is coming at the infant too quickly, the infant does not need to engage in that strong suck to extract the milk from the bottle. And so that can be really detrimental to that breastfeeding relationship for moms. We'll often see a much more organized and comfortable feeding as well, when an infant is able to continue to engage in a suck, swallow, and breathe pattern without frequent pausing to manage the milk flow. And so we'll actually sometimes see a better feed, more comfortable, even more efficient with a slower flow bottle because they're not managing a milk flow. All right, next slide, please. And this is my part here. If you stop sharing, Christina, I can share. As quickly as I can. Here we go. Okay. Share sound.
We don't recommend feeding babies with a bottle while they are lying on their backs because they are more vulnerable to overfeeding and tend to lose control of the flow of the bottle. This can end up being a forced feeding situation because they have to keep swallowing to keep up with the flow of the bottle to prevent choking. Paced feeding mimics the control babies can have at the breast and prevents forced feeding. Some breastfeeding experts have observed that babies are less likely to refuse the breast when they receive the bottle in a paced fashion. Start by holding the baby upright, supporting the torso with your arm. Place the nipple on the upper or lower lip, wait until he opens his mouth, and let him draw the nipple in. Avoid sticking the nipple in his mouth before he's ready. It helps to let the baby suck a little without getting milk. This is similar to breastfeeding, where a baby sucks for a while before the milk starts to flow. Allow the nipple to partially fill with milk, leaving some air in the nipple. By keeping the baby upright, we slow down the feeding. Gravity isn't pulling the milk out as fast when the bottle is level with the floor. Babies take natural breaks when eating, and when those natural breaks come, tilt the bottle down a bit to really allow the break, preventing milk from flowing into the bottle while the baby is taking that break. When the baby resumes sucking, tilt the bottle back up. That way, parents can relax, get to know their baby, enjoy gazing at the baby, and watch overall behavior. Follow the baby's lead and allow the baby to have control. When the baby has control, the baby will not drink as quickly. It is common to see people wiggle the bottle in an attempt to get the baby to suck more. This should be avoided because we want the baby to set the pace of the feeding. Watch the baby's face for facial expressions or signs that they need a slower flow, such as widening of the eyes, furrowing of the brow, or turning or pulling away. Even a baby that is accustomed to quick feedings will begin to welcome the breaks and will probably start to take breaks on his own. As you can see here, the bottle is horizontal and the baby is taking a break. Paced feeding can reduce pressure on mom when she goes back to work. It slows down how much the baby takes in, so we reduce overeating. It helps avoid the baby eating large feedings when away from mom. If he does eat too much at daycare, he might not nurse as frequently as mom would like when they are together. No need to worry about the baby taking in air. It will come out one end or the other. Burping the baby periodically will help if air intake is a concern. This method of bottle feeding takes some practice. When working with families, explain paced feeding while they offer the bottle. If you show them how to do it, try to make a point of having them practice it in front of you.
Okay. That worked more seamlessly than I thought. Okay. So I hope that was a little bit of a good example for everyone to see. So you're probably implementing some of those strategies already when you're feeding infants. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on the developmental progression of feeding, and I'll be as brief as possible because this is where I would dive deep and talk for hours and nerd out a little bit on the complexity of sucking and swallowing. So I just want to touch too, on the top is a picture of a baby that's feeding in a sideline position. And so paced bottle feeding can also be offered to infants in a sideline position to support that infant alignment that Paula talked a lot about, with that ear, shoulder, and hips in a line towards the ceiling with a nice hips in flexion and hands to midline. So a lot of our premature babies are fed in sideline. So depending on if you are, I was excited in the poll to see that more than half of you have worked with previously preterm or medically complex babies. And so this is a position that they may still be using when they enter childcare. So having that nice alignment is super important, but you can also implement paced bottle feeding in this position as well. So it's very important to offer the bottle in a responsive manner, meaning just like in that video that we saw, offering the bottle to the infant's lips and waiting for permission in a form of opening and latching to enter the infant's mouth. It is the feeder's job to provide positive oral experiences for infants in order to foster an infant's enjoyment of eating. We do a lot of teaching in the NICU about honoring an infant's acceptance and refusal. And the same applies to all infants to support continued enjoyment of feeding. So infants develop feeding reflexes in utero, and these are crucial when it comes to successful feeding after birth. So an infant has a sucking reflex as early as 12 to 14 weeks in utero, and their swallowing reflex develops as early as 15 to 18 weeks in utero. So they've had some practice swallowing amniotic fluid and sucking on their fingers and in utero. And that sucking reflex will integrate or kind of fade away somewhere between 2 and 4 months of age. And so often around this time, a child is entering the childcare setting. And at this time, when that sucking reflex integrates, the infant has a more of a volitional ability to choose whether to engage in the feeding or not. And so sometimes we'll see infants begin to refuse feedings around this time, especially if they've had repeated negative experiences or have not been fed in a responsive manner. And this is sometimes seen in previous preterm infants or children having medical complexities given their medical history. So as feeders, we must support infant engagement for long-term feeding success and enjoyment. So next slide, please. So typically infants between 6 weeks and 4 months of age eat around every 2 to 4 hours, sometimes sooner. And so we really want to go based on an infant's hunger cue. So I just put a little picture on here, and it's best to catch infants in those early hunger cue stage when they're stirring, they're turning their head, they're starting to do some rooting. This will support more energy for feeding and typically result in a more organized and regulated feeding for the infant versus waiting until they're really, really hungry and crying, which is in a perfect world is great. I tell parents that all the time. You know, there's going to be times where you have to wait until they're telling you they're really hungry, given situations that you're in. So just as best as you can, kind of catching early feeding cues and early hunger cues are optimal for the baby. Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
So I'm Michelle, and I've been a lactation consultant and a registered dietitian for more than 20 years. I think this is the best job ever, being involved with babies and children, and all of you in your different aspects. It's a perfect thing. So next slide. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about more on feeding, and as well as storage and handling. So thank you to all of you, and hats off to you for the work that you do. But also, just like parents, you're probably always finding, and you're here today, finding that you can learn new ways to perfect your skills. So even though I've been at this for many years, I find I'm always learning new things. Next slide. So take time for feedings. If you just listen to Paula and you listen to Brittany, the kinds of things they're talking about, you know, you need to check and see that they're comfortable, they're in good alignment, especially when they're really tiny, and then watching what they're doing. So babies are actually learning at each interaction with each person and each day, and their brain sizes doubles in that first year. So they're also going to double in their length. So this is the period of very rapid growth, and it's where breast milk contributes so much in terms of growth hormones. Can't put growth hormones in formula, so this is so important. Babies triple in their weight, and so by the time they're a year, they're somewhere between 20 and 24 pounds. Next slide. So breast milk feedings may be less ounces than a typical formula feeding. And I'm wondering, and you can put it in the chat, if you've noticed that. So when I first started as a nutritionist, I worked for the WIC program. I had breastfed my child very unsuccessfully for 6 weeks. They started him off on bottles. I didn't see him for 12 hours. There was nothing wrong with him. They just said they needed to give him formula to see if he could swallow. So my experience was, you know, really bad. My sisters had breastfed and I saw them breastfeeding, and I thought this was how I was going to do it. So my whole feeling was one of very sad discouragement, and I wanted no one to have my experience. So I started learning about breast milk. But the fact was that when I really started learning, I realized, oh, there's something going on here, because my formula fed babies would be taking 8 ounces, and the bottle fed breast milk babies might only be taking 5 to 6 ounces. And that was a puzzle to me, and I didn't see any research on it. Since then, there's been research. And so breast milk actually is more nutrient dense. And now we know much more about the intestine and the gut than many years ago. And we know it's more completely digested. Earlier, someone mentioned the lipases, I think it was Christina, that are in breast milk. Lipases actually take the fat apart so that it can be digested. So we have lipases in our own system. Babies have those too. But when your food arrives with the lipases, it gets digested more completely and more quickly. And the babies, as they develop, their pancreas and their liver become more mature, and they help with the digestion. So that's why later on, even though the baby is quite large, the feedings are increased in terms of the amount. So I don't know if anyone has ever experienced that. So sometimes mothers will see a formula fed baby, or they have friends who are formula feeding, and say, oh, send 8 ounces of milk to the daycare center per feeding. And this can make them very confused. So reassuring them that, you know, try 4 ounces, try 5 ounces. And then, as you all know, it's good to have some 2-ounce bottles in daycare so that they can, top off a feeding on a very, very hungry day. Babies do go through growth spurts, and there's not a lot of research, but there's a lot of mothers who will tell you that's true. And so some days they just eat more. And so that's a normal thing. Next slide, please. So some of the special qualities that I can add to what was already said was babies don't need water during their first years. Breast milk provides plenty of water. It's nearly 90% water. You think, oh my gosh, that's a lot of water if you think of it. But this is pure uncontaminated water. And even in the summer when it's very hot, they do not need extra water. It's fun as they are in their second 6 months, so somewhere between 6 and 12 months, to give them a little water. You can have them sip from your water bottle or sip from a cup. And that's just learning. It's fun for them to learn to handle something like that. But it's not a necessity. Breast milk changes throughout that first year. And we talked a little bit about that earlier, but it meets the baby's needs in so many different ways. So the mother who's exclusively pumping, her body knows to make different milk as the time goes on. It's based sort of on time. And one of the examples of that is that babies that are born prematurely will have their milk is higher in protein because they're still growing. And somehow your body knows that as they're separated from the placenta too early, the milk is special for that baby in those first few weeks. So a reminder, baby's intestine is also maturing to more efficiently digest nutrients. So we have two things going on there. Next slide, please. So newness and novelty develop the brain. So that's why each feeding needs to be special with eye contact and voice in that slightly higher sing-song voice we use when we talk to babies and to our pets. And every culture uses that. So we know there's something special to it. So talk to the baby, look at them. Sometimes I worked in a childcare when I was in my graduate program at Syracuse as part of my dietitian orientation. And I saw daycare workers sometimes talking to their colleagues a lot and sort of ignoring the baby as they fed them. And this was many years ago. I'm sure they didn't have training about that particular thing, but it's very important to give them that eye contact and voice because they're learning from your brain and your voice. So I like to look at breast milk as a gourmet meal with hundreds of nutrients that are lacking in formula. So act as if you just entered a fine restaurant with this tiny little person who's in your care and give them your full attention. And then if you're using formula, I treat the feeding similarly because it's the best there is at the time. And so next slide, please. So in terms of handling the milk, people worry a lot about the temperature, warm or just barely warm or cold. What should it be? It's digested similarly. So ask about how the parent typically gives the feeding. And it's really the choice of the parent and the baby. Some babies do not like cold milk and others just don't care or they love it cold. So babies are little persons with opinions. And so make sure that you honor that particular thing. And then heat, place it in a warmer or in a bowl of medium hot water, not boiling water. Of course, we never microwave. And the obvious reason, and I think this explains it to parents because I've had parents say, oh, we always microwave it. And this applies to formula too. Even though in breast milk, there are living cells. So remember that it's kind of like your lettuce. You wouldn't put your lettuce in your microwave because it would be completely flopped. Even when breast milk is frozen, it still has living cells. And that's why we only keep it usually 6 months or so, because it may start to go bad. And how can you tell if it's bad? It doesn't smell good. That's the basic, most important thing is it just doesn't smell good. So the amount, suggest a few backup bottles of only 2 ounces to use for an unusually hungry baby, or it's almost time for pickup. And if the mom usually feeds the baby before a long drive home, she's arrived with very full breasts. and you want to help her out. So you can give half a feeding or just an ounce and keep the baby happy for those few minutes until the mother arrives. And just curious, you can put this in the chat or you can speak up. Do you find most moms give you about 4 or 5 ounces when they bring the baby at 2, 3, or 4 months? Just a question. Next slide. So when you handle breast milk, I think this is important that people don't give it a big vicious shake when you want to shake it up, because breast milk, if you leave it sitting, the fat will be on the top. It's not homogenized like your milk that you might get from the grocery store. And so without homogenization, you have that cream on the top. So it's suggested that it not be shaken, but it should be just swirled. And you see that beautiful golden swirl. So think of that swirl and just swirl the ingredients and it will mix up the fats. And that keeps those enzymes that digest fats from breaking apart. If you really shake them, it does do damage to them. And the same thing, you wouldn't put your lettuce in the blender unless you have to eat liquid lettuce or something. But anyway, next slide. So breastfeeding is a struggle, and the struggle is very real. So remember that pumping is often a struggle for parents, so handle that breast milk carefully. Next slide. So just some refreshers and reminders for handling. We're short. We only have 12 minutes left, and we have such great questions. I don't want to shortchange anyone. So I'm not going to have Christina share these 2 documents, but these are something you should post in your facility. One is really for parents, and the other is really for childcare providers. So take a good look at those because they explain everything. And one of the things I found when I was doing research for this presentation was that there are confusing statements out there about how long to leave breast milk out. So if the baby has had the breast milk in their mouth, they're sucking and then they're done, and there's an ounce or 2 left, you can leave it out for an hour and reuse it. If you're in the daycare setting, I hope you just put it back in the refrigerator, even though in an hour or 2, if the baby wants to finish that, it's possible. If the breast milk, if you thawed it and the baby doesn't want it, you can put it immediately back in the refrigerator. And then the whole thing is going to be good 2 or 3 hours later. If you just thawed it and put it back in the refrigerator and you give it for the very next feeding. So I know you have some regulations about those, but you have to use a little common sense with it too. And throwing out perfectly good breast milk is very hard on parents. Okay, next slide. So what have you noticed, those contradictions? So we'll have a little discussion about that. Should you be rigid? Should you stick to the very minute, as close as you can, obviously? And should you be reasonable? So if the milk was out for 15 minutes longer, but it was in the kitchen area, which is cooler, then it's good for longer. Should you give the parent the option of saving it or not? I think that's a nice alternative. You can say, we thawed this bottle and the baby just wasn't ready for it, just slept right through. Maybe you'd like to take it home. So that might be something. So any questions? Next slide, I think we're done. Yeah, so remember the feeding cues and not the clock, and the etiquette of feeding this special gourmet meal to your child, politely inviting the baby to the meal. And remember to hold the bottle so they won't have to gulp. And a lot of people are concerned about air in the bottle and the baby getting too much air. They don't do that when they gulp. They do that when they gulp. That's when they get too much air, because if the bottle is at floor, level and then tipped up slightly, they will have, there will be mostly bottle milk flowing and they won't get too much air. So there is no research showing that if the bottle is not tipped way up vertically, that the baby gets more air that way. Okay, questions? Thank you. Thank you. Christina for those slides.
There was a lot of really great comments in the chat about like storage and things that different providers on the call are doing for their center. And then Becca had a really great suggestion, and I really liked it, of the fact that if you have like expired milk, or like you had mentioned, Michelle, we do in the childcare world, we do have within our licensing guidelines of, you know, what constitutes when the milk needs, you know, can't be used any longer, or needs to be sent home or what have you. And Becca said for expired breast milk, you can send it back home and it can be added to the baby's bath, which I didn't even think of. Because I know too, with breast milk, it's considered like a miracle kind of like medicine, so to speak. I've heard people putting it on like eczema and things like that. And so I just thought that was cool that she shared that.
Cradle cap too.
Oh, really?
Especially the fatty part of the milk. So
interesting.
Okay.
I have a question. And mind you, I have 2 boys, so you would think I would know this. But all right, so picture you have an infant and you have a toddler, and you are, you know, you have I should say you're nursing a toddler and you now have a new infant. And you were saying that the milk that you have created is perfectly made for the new baby. So, but you're nursing a toddler.
The baby is the priority. Your body prioritizes the baby. And the toddler is only having, you know, a couple of feedings a day. The new baby is drawing the most of it. And sometimes toddlers will refuse the milk because it changes in taste.
Okay.
But
makes sense.
You know,
I just like at the moment I was like,
great question. Great question. No, I'm sure it was.
And sometimes toddlers will pick up because there's a new plentiful supply.
Right.
With the new baby. For sure. They're like, oh, great.
More milk.
More milk for me, but wait.
And your body adjusts to that really seamlessly too, you know, and that's important to remember. I actually had, my girls are 21 months apart, and my oldest probably would have weaned around 2 years or so. She was starting to kind of die down a little, and then she ended up nursing till she was 4.5. So I nursed them for like 2 years together. And it was no problem with supply, you know, as long as breastfeeding's been well established and all of that. And, you know, your body really does do a wonderful job of adjusting.
That is always just amazing to me, of how the body like figures that out. It's just so cool. Just so cool.
So I think one of the things I would add to this presentation is a video, and maybe Brittany can provide this, a video on the suck, swallow, breathe sequence, showing that really clearly. There are some that show, you know, the whole facial expression and side of the face that show that how a baby does that. And it helps you when you're trying to do paced bottle feeding. So that might be helpful if, Brittany, if you have one that you can put your finger on, or I can find one.
And then I have another question about when there are moms that they make a lot of milk, and they give milk, you know, to other moms. And if their milk is being made precisely for their baby, like, I'm just trying to think, how does that work for someone else's baby?
So I'd love to answer this. When mothers are sharing milk, it's usually not one feeding. or it's usually not a lot of feeding, it's one feeding or two feedings or here and there. Somebody ran out of milk, they just say to their friend, oh, can you give me some milk for tomorrow? I am short a bottle, whatever. So it doesn't really matter because that's not the main source of their food. And if that mother is sharing milk and she's providing the main milk, then it's going to kind of match her, probably her own baby's age. And it's probably still better than formula. So, and the same thing is true as the baby gets older after 6 months or so. If you ran out of milk and you used whole milk for one feeding, it's probably not going to matter. And remember that formula is cow's milk. So whole milk is not what you'd give an infant in general, but one, dose of something like that is probably not going to matter. And it just brings down the anxiety for mothers to, realize that there are openings here, and we don't have to be extremely rigid because we're giving the best 99% of the time.
And I just wanted to reinforce what Michelle was saying. You may see a lot of this out there in the communities of milk sharing and that kind of thing. And, a mom making a conscious, informed decision of who she's, sharing with, or, who she, her baby is receiving from. Those are things that are done. And there are good guidelines from the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine on that. That a mom's informed, that she knows who she is. One of the things we never ever want to support is buying milk over the internet, because that has, many times been shown in the research to be tampered with or diluted and that kind of thing. And just, but moms do it. And, that whole formula shortage thing caused a lot of this. I am on the board of the Mother's Milk Bank Northeast, which, we provide donor milk to, milk all over the Northeast and even down to Tennessee. I mean, our milk bank provides in a lot of different areas to NICUs and to moms that want to purchase, but not everyone can afford that. It's in the 4.50 an ounce range. Is what it is, and that is not, but there are moms that do it, and of course that's where, if you're handling that milk, you need to, all of this needs to be, it's a precious commodity, it really is. So we see moms that do purchase donor milk, no doubt about it, that don't have premature infants and that kind of thing, but it is really, really used in NICUs. But again, the thing that, we want to remember is that, we wouldn't encourage anything, any mom buying it over the internet and not knowing who that source is. But I think there probably is a lot of milk sharing. And like Michelle said, I mean, this has been going on for years. Mothers have been nursing other babies, other mothers' babies and things like that, from way back when. But again, when we know the source, that's when it's really, really important. And again, American Academy of Pediatrics has some good, not American Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine has some really good guidelines on sharing of milk.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Does anybody have any other questions or comments before we kind of wind down our morning?
One of my mamas was recently able to donate 275 ounces to another mom. She is regularly producing what her baby needs. And she is pumping exclusively. Most of the time, she'll do about one feeding a day. And she just gifted another mama all of her February stash because she was running out of room in her freezer.
That is amazing.
And
holy moly.
It's the amount of compassion and love that is shared between breastfeeding mamas is amazing. And I love that in childcare we can support that practice and really help these moms get what they need and give these babies what they need. So keep up the good work, guys. You're doing great.
I think a good guideline for moms who are going to share milk is to look at the Human Milk Bank guidelines for contributing milk. And that will give them some parameters on questions to ask of another mother who's, they're going to be accepting the milk from. So it just, if someone wants to donate, you say, well, oh, here are the guidelines that they suggest. I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm going to stop
wanted
the
to share that-
recording.
I just wanted to share that we have a link in the chat for if you have any interest in becoming a member of the New Hampshire Breastfeeding Task Force, or if you have any additional questions, you can call Joyce's number right there. She's our co-chair. And we have posted in the slides and stuff our Gmail address as well if you want to send any follow-up questions or anything like that. And we'd be happy to help.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And we're going to be sending out